Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Edina City Council meeting. It is Tuesday, January 21st, 2025. It is 7:01 p.m. And if you were here in the audience, you heard Director Bennerott talk about how we're continuing to do meetings in a hybrid sort of form. Folks may be watching or participating in the meeting, or planning on participating in the meeting by watching the meeting on cable TV or on youtube.com/Edina TV. And we've got a couple opportunities for people to call in this evening, both with respect to public comment. And just a reminder, if you want to address the council on a matter of concern to you or inquire about a particular matter, it can't be an item that's on the agenda this evening or scheduled for a future public hearing, and you'll have 3 minutes. And that's advice to everybody listening online as well. And you'll get that yellow warning light when you got 30 seconds left, and you should be thinking about wrapping up your comments at that point in time. There's also a public hearing matter tonight, one singular public hearing matter, and folks can certainly testify in that matter that are either here in the chambers or participating remotely. So having provided that information, let me call the meeting to order and ask our clerk, Sharon Ellison, to call the roll.
Councilmember Agnew.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Risser.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, everyone. We've got a meeting agenda in front of us that's been published in advance of the meeting as required. And is there anyone on the council or from a staff standpoint that wishes to modify the meeting agenda in any form or fashion? All right, is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
Member Jackson moves, Member Pierce seconds. The adoption of the meeting agenda is published. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the meeting agenda is published, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And now we are at community comment, folks. So again, a reminder, we're happy to listen to concerns that you have. It can't be an item that's on the agenda this evening or scheduled for a future public hearing. Let's look first into the audience to see if there's anybody with us that wishes to come and testify or comment from a public standpoint. I know that we've got a couple of folks here, I think from Project Earth, I think, yeah. And usually we have people give their first names and last names. If you guys don't feel comfortable giving your full names, that's fine too, or your home address. But I think just let folks know you're from Project Earth and tell us your first names and then let us know what you're concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Olivia Wegman-Kreider. I am a student at Edina High School and a co-leader of Project Earth. Overconsumption is a real issue, and unwanted clothing represents 6% of municipal waste. Even 85% of donated clothes still end up in landfills. The reduction of that municipal waste is one sector goal of Edina's Climate Action Plan, and clothing reuse is an important part of that, so I would encourage everyone to come to the clothing swap hosted by Project Earth at Edina High School on February 22nd. We believe it will be an excellent opportunity to bring the community together and strive towards meeting those goals set by the Climate Action Plan, especially the diversion of recoverable materials. So thank you for all you do supporting the development of Edina into a more sustainable place.
My name is Alexander. I'm a freshman at Edina High School and a member of the environmental club Project Earth. In my 14 and a half years of life, I've seen summers get hotter and less snowfall. Seeing the changes that surrounded me, I joined Project Earth as soon as I could. At Project Earth, I learned about the Edina Climate Action Plan. I was immediately drawn by the climate, health, and safety section. As someone who suffers from asthma, I wanted to see what Edina was doing to work with air quality. I learned that they wanted to plant more pollinator gardens and reduce the use of fossil fuels. We invite all Edina residents to visit Edina Better Together to learn more about the 8 sections of the climate plan and find a section that interests you. To learn about the climate plan in a festive atmosphere, join Project Earth and many other organizations at the Earth Day Festival in Weber Park in Morningside on April 27th. Our club also encouraged the Edina School Board to apply for 2 new electric school buses through the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. We are expecting to find out if the grant was approved any day now. Air quality would improve and youth can breathe clean air, not dirty diesel exhaust. Participating in Project Earth makes me wonder where we will be in 2030. In order for the best future for me and my classmates, please take action now. Thank you, Mayor and council members.
Yes, thank you both for being here. And that closing swap, maybe we could get that up one more time on the screen and make sure everybody knows that's February 22nd. And that's turned into just a tremendous event with a lot of participation. So thank you for participating in the sponsorship of it. And I'm pleased to see that everything's going well at Project Earth at the school. That there's still how many students are in Project Earth now participating?
We have probably like 10 or so like regular members who are really committed, but we try to do events and stuff that are more far-reaching throughout the school as well.
Okay, good. Good to know. Thanks for being here this evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience wishes to express a matter of concern to the council? Yes, sir. Come on up and give us your name and address.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. I appreciate giving me the opportunity. My name is Bobby Katuria, and I am the outreach coordinator for the Council of Hindus of North America. And we want to, first of all, thank you guys. There was an incident at the SV Temple, which is in Edina, and we appreciate the police that helped us with the joint statement. We just want you guys to know that there are Hindus that are part of Minnesota that call ourselves home. We might have come from different parts of the world, and we either work here or we worship here, and we appreciate whatever help we got. We just want to point out that this is not only our place where our kids go to school, are born, we are not born here, most of us, but our kids were born, and I don't live in Edina, but I worship in Edina, but my friend does. We just want to make sure that extra vigilance is placed so that none of that incident ever happens again. We are a peaceful community. We want to make sure that all religions are respected by everyone. We respect every religion. We respect every aspect of it. And I appreciate your time. Anything you guys could do to keep it vigilant, we'll keep an open eye as well. I am not being asked by the temple to say anything. I just came as a citizen and as member of Kona. And we want to make sure that anything we can do to help as well is there. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And
Yeah, thank you,
That's all I
Mr.
have to say.
Katuria, for coming in. That was very kind of you to come in and express your gratitude for some incident that apparently occurred down there. Is it?
thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. And I know I had an email from Madhu Reddy, who was one of the founders of SV Temple, who wanted to get together too. So I'll try to make sure I get together with him, and we appreciate your comments regarding your religion and other religions as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a prevalent attitude in our community, I think. So
Yes,
we want to respect everybody and their respect and their religions.
yes.
Okay, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience wish to address the council on a matter of concern to them?
Good evening. Very cold evening. It's warming up. That's good. Janie Weston, 6136 Brookview Avenue. My comment is on the open public comment at the beginning of the meetings. Please leave it exactly the way it is. Do not move it to the end of the meeting. Some meetings go past midnight, and I've been there. How many people can hold out that long, or are able to, time-wise? Public comment is just that. It is public. And often, case in point tonight, the high school kids and the other gentleman here, they are giving information and messages, not just to you, but it's to anyone in the city that cares to watch the meeting, whether they're here, online, watching it live, or watching it tomorrow or later this week. And there's often very important information that is shared at public comment, and it needs to be at the beginning of the meeting. Please do not mess with this. It works well now, even though sometimes you get some comments that are antagonistic, don't make you feel very good, or other people sitting here. But that's what democracy is, and we need to keep it the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weston. We're going to address this issue, I think, on the 5th of February. And we're trying to gather some more, or 4th of February, excuse me. We're going to try to gather some more information. Yeah, I should look at the calendar. That first Tuesday in February. Anyone else? Okay. Let's turn now to the folks that might be listening in or watching in a different way.
I don't have any callers at this time.
Okay. Our practice is that our city manager responds to the inquiries that were made or comments that were made at the prior meeting. We do that a little bit more closely in time to the meeting that's held. Usually there's something posted on the city website by the end of that week in which a meeting is held. But you also follow up and let us know at this meeting whether there's anything you needed to comment on. Manager Neal.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, we did not have any questions at the last council meeting to respond to.
Okay, very good. Len, let's move on to the consent agenda. Is there anyone on the council that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda?
So moved.
A second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second to approve the items on the consent agenda in a single motion. There's about a dozen of them here to deal with. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the items set forth on the consent agenda in a single motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Items on the consent agenda are all approved, 6.1 through 6.12. And now we've got a special recognition and presentation. It's a year where we haven't had to worry about salt as much as normal, but nonetheless, salt in our natural streams and waterways is something that we're all concerned about. And so there is a winter salt week that comes this time of the year. And we've got Jessica Vanderwerf Wilson, our water resources manager, with us. And then one of our residents, Sue Nissen, is here to speak on behalf of the proclamation that I will read. And we might as well start out with reading the proclamation, and then I'll turn to Jessica and Sue Nissen. The proclamation reads as follows: Winter Salt Week, January 27th through the 31st, 2025. Whereas the City of Edina relies on de-icing salt as part of its winter maintenance program to maintain safe and accessible roadways. And whereas all of the salt applied to roadways ends up in our fresh water. And whereas chloride contamination from de-icing salt has been found in lakes, streams, and groundwater in Edina's 9 Mile Creek and Minnehaha Creek watersheds and across the state. And whereas reducing overuse of de-icing salt reduces damage to infrastructure and property, protects freshwater resources, and reduces harm to aquatic plants and animals. And whereas it is crucial to raise awareness among residents, businesses, and local government agencies about the responsible use of de-icing salt to protect both public safety and long-term health of our freshwater resources. And whereas Winter Salt Week provides an opportunity to educate our community about the responsible use of de-icing salt, including environmental considerations and effective application methods. And whereas the residents of Edina can contribute to de-icing salt pollution reduction efforts locally by learning about smart salting practices, that's smart salting practices, engaged in safe winter driving, hiring trained service providers, and participating in the Low Salt, No Salt Minnesota program. And whereas the city is committed to promoting a sustainable approach to winter maintenance for the benefit of present and future generations, now therefore we, the City Council of the City of Edina, hereby proclaim January 27th through the 31st, 2025 as Winter Salt Week in the City of Edina, and urge all residents, businesses, and city departments to take part in activities and initiatives that promote the responsible use of de-icing salt and encourage the adoption of winter maintenance strategies which maintain safety while reducing environmental harm. Is there a motion to adopt the proclamation regarding Winter Salt Week?
So moved.
Second.
Member Jackson moves, Member Agnew seconds the adoption of the proclamation on Winter Salt Week designating January 27th to the 31st, 2025 as Winter Salt Week in the city of Edina. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the proclamation say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. The proclamation is adopted. Ms. Wilson, I'm going to hand this to you and Ms. Nissen, and then we're eager to hear the comments both of you have.
Thank you for recognizing Winter Salt Week, a week that brings together organizations and agencies across the country to elevate the conversations around winter salt pollution and reduction solutions. The week features daily live streams from ecologists, public works staff, and policymakers, a Smart Salting for Community Leaders workshop on Friday hosted by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, several local action day events, including chloride water sampling events, art exhibitions and workshops, and a Pause and Pavement event on Friday afternoon at Weber Park, where pet parents can learn how to evaluate pet-friendly de-icing packaging claims and reduce overuse of salt to protect people and pets. Lastly, the support from the city continues beyond next week through the Low Salt, No Salt Minnesota program, where people can get customized support for reducing overuse of salt at their property without compromising safety. And Sue Nissen has a few words as well.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks, Ms. Wilson.
Mayor, Council, my name's Sue Nissen, and my address is 4408 West 58th Street. So first, I want to thank you. Last year was the first year of Winter Salt Week, and Edina proclaimed it Winter Salt Week, and we were the first city. Thank you, and followed up this year. And this event has been so well received nationwide. I mean, there's a real need to get the message out. And on a personal note, I've been a water steward now for 10 years, and salt has been my cause, and getting that message out isn't always easy. And so the weight of the voice of the city is important, that you acknowledge it, and I just really personally appreciate this support, so I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Nissen.
Yeah, you know, and I want to tell you that the value of Minnesota, of this Salt Week, is that Minnesotans we're going to hear firsthand from experts, people that know about the growing problem and they know about the solution. Because my experience is that citizens, and I talk to a lot of them, they are shocked to hear that salts don't break down. We are used to our pollutants just somehow separating and going away. And that isn't what happens with salts. And then the next thing they ask me is, well, what product can we use instead? Because there's always another product, right? There is not another product. We have the salts. That's what we need to use in cases where they are called for. We just have got to use less of them. And the answer, I say, is we've got to have different processes on how to use the salts. And then I lose people because they don't understand that. And in order to get this change made, they've got to have hope that this change can happen, and that's part of what Winter Salt Week is going to do. I am so excited to have these experts talking about problems and solutions and ways, and they know, they work in operations, they work in management, they work in design, they work in policy. They know how these changes can be made and still maintain safety. Salt and safety are not necessarily like this. We've just come to believe that. And I just want to call out Jess Wilson, because She's one of our Minnesota policy experts, and she's one of the people that is coming up with ways that policy can reduce salt use. There's a lot of other ways besides policy. So there is a large body of work to draw from, and Minnesotans should take good heart with that we have options. We just need to get on them and get going. And to have our community believe that so we can make the changes is really important. And I want to say one more shout out to Edina, and that's at 50th and France. Because if you want to see best practices working, you go up and shop at 50th and France and walk around the sidewalks out there, and you can see clearly where Edina maintains that area and where other people do. And I am sure it's safe up there. I have no doubt. So anyway, we have a pathway to chloride reduction. I hope you'll sign up for some of the seminars, and I hope you'll encourage other people you know to sign up. In the end, it's a chemical, and it's going to do what it's going to do. I use this spoon. You know how many gallons of water this permanently pollutes, right? Thank you. Okay. Thank you for your time tonight.
Yeah, Ms. Nissen, thank you. Thank you for your persistence, your diligence on this effort. I mean, without you and the other residents of Edina, several years ago now, coming to us and saying, I think we should be looking at the level of use of our de-icing salt, and I think we've reduced it. Jessica, you probably have the percentage. We're down, 30% of what we used to use in de-icing, and those efforts are in large part due to these residents that, like yourself, that picked up on the need to do this, and it's now legislative time. I mean, to the extent we have a legislative session this year, I suspect you'll be back over there doing some of the work that you do so well, and the advocacy work. Yeah. Okay, well, good luck with that.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And I just wanted to echo the effectiveness of the communication campaign. I think we talked, I'm going to say 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I still have the water cup. And when you told me the size of the driveway, I only needed to use one of those, no more than, you said, one of those. And I thought, well, there's no way that's the case. And I still use that cup. And that year, I bought a bag of salt. And I would go through that bag every year and get a new bag, or maybe even 2 bags. I'm still using the same bag, and it's been 3 years just using that one little cup. So very effective communication campaign. I still talk about it to this day, so congratulations on definitely making a difference in this space.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Member Pierce. All right. Thanks, Ms. Nissen.
Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. All right. We've got one other matter in this special recognitions and presentations portion of the agenda, and that is to have our city engineer, engineering director, Chad Milner, give us an update on the Roslyn Park pedestrian bridge. And so we're all eager to have this, I think, because this is something we've been working on for some period of time, and the council picked out, they had 3 good choices for design, and
we can put it there. Got it.
Snow Kralich was instrumental in presenting something that resonated with the majority of the council, and now we're going to talk about how we're going to get it done, I think, a little bit tonight. So,
yeah,
Director Milner.
Thanks, Mayor, members of council. We're going to give you an update tonight on the Roslyn Park pedestrian bridge. It seems like your Roslyn Park theme here for the evening, considering what you talked about at the work session. So tonight we have our project team. We have Ryan Evans here from Bolton and Mink Engineering. Jim Marster is on that team also. And then Snow Krylake Architects, Matt's here this evening, and Axel and Brad have also been helping out with that team as we work through this very interesting project. I want to make a note that all the graphics and layouts are draft at this point. So you're going to see some stuff. They may change, so don't hold us to anything you see on the graphics here this evening. Take a step back. In 23 and 24, we were in front of the residents and in front of you many, many times. Getting to that point where June of last year, we hired the architect. And since that time, the architect and engineer has been working on this project to replace that pedestrian bridge you see in the bottom right-hand corner. That's been hit twice in 22, was repaired, functions, but it only has steps, and we can do a much better job there of having a nice iconic bridge there on that location. So we'll hand it over to Matt now to discuss a little bit of the layouts and some of the architectural features of the structure itself.
Thanks, Chad. So I'm just going to walk through really briefly where we're at with the
Can you reintroduce yourself too, please?
Yes, sorry, Matthew Krylik, Snow Krylik Architects.
Thank you.
So what we're looking at right now is the plan. To the south or bottom of your sheet is Rosalind Park, and that is where we have the ramp that really comes into a landing and drops off where the red dot is. Yeah. Thanks, Chad. And then on the residential side, the high part of that ramp is adjacent to the freeway so that you're further up from the traffic, and then as you move down, the dash line is representative of the future sound wall that will be in place. So we are trying to coordinate with that future sound wall as well. So this is looking eastbound on Highway 62. As we had talked before, there's been a lot of resolution. I think there's still this sort of general character that we presented when we were pursuing the project in the competition. The entire bridge is clad in a wood product, and I'll talk a little bit more about that momentarily. These are wood slats that are attached to a steel truss bridge. And so really trying to create a very sort of simple, iconic moment as you're moving from one side to the other. And then we have a view looking back. This is where you can see, as I was describing on the neighborhood side, where the bridge is up higher. We're using that wood screening again, adjacent to the highway. It then returns down on the slope adjacent to the sound wall. As you enter Rosalind Park, this is what, there's these small models here. We can leave behind as well if you'd like. But this is a moment where there's an overlook that happens over Rosalind. It's sort of just a moment to stop. There's what we're looking at is a built-in bench that would occur there as well. Just really a moment of pause. There's really a pretty spectacular view at that location. And you'll see there are, later in the presentation, we are exploring two options for stairs, which will come up. This location is where one of those would occur. This particular rendering is not showing the stair in it. And so this is looking at that same location, where the red dot is, that's where that overlook was. And then you're coming down, and eventually this touches grade and just becomes an on-site sidewalk, essentially, that's ramping up to the bridge. The products are pretty straightforward. I think the structure itself is a relatively typical steel structure, but we are playing with the shape of that. It's canted, it's curved, so there's things that are a little different from what you're used to seeing on a sort of standard MnDOT bridge. But then we are using this product, which is a thermally modified wood, so it's taking ash, other woods that generally don't have that sort of stability that a cedar would have, and by thermally modifying it, you get, sometimes a 30, 40-year life on these that really stand the test of time. They weather over time. So ultimately what you're seeing to the far left is where this weathered wood will eventually get to, and within about a year or two it'll get to that, and then there's really no maintenance required after that, unless you wanted to maintain that natural wood. But I think we really love the way in which this weathers to this almost like a silver tone, and then you still get the textural quality of the wood that comes through, and then using a really simple steel mesh that is, for safety reasons, obviously, in the areas that's required.
I'm Ryan Evans with Bolton & Bank, the bridge engineer on the project. A little different take than the architect here. But I just want to give a brief overview of some of the more challenging elements.
Ryan, would you give us your full name too, please?
Ryan Evans.
Yeah, thanks for the record.
I want to give a brief overview of some of the more challenging elements associated with creating this aesthetic we're going for here. A big element is the outward cant and the V shape of the railings. Our railing needs to provide fall protection for people. It needs to screen objects from dropping down onto the highway. And in this case, it also needs to serve as an attachment for our arborwood elements. All this has to come together in a way that can be readily fabricated, assembled, and maintained as cost effectively as possible, and needs to be configured in a way that doesn't pose a threat to traffic during routine degradation or even maintenance in the future when you're going to maintain these products, that they don't fall into the traveled way. Since we're over Highway 62, MnDOT is going to have heavy involvement, and ultimately we'll have to review and approve of our concepts here. The truss segment, which is what's shown on the left here over the highway, will also have significant atypical loads associated with it due to this outward cant of the truss members there, as well as challenging fabrication elements and delivery and shipping to the site. All at least above and beyond what a normal pedestrian truss bridge would have. These various items make accurate cost estimating upfront very challenging, and engaging with a truss fabricator and contractors during the design phase will help vet the fabricatability of these concepts, as well as provide cost reduction strategies and help value engineer and make some critical decisions early in the design phase, such that we can make sure we're staying within budget, but ultimately getting this very unique, awesome-looking bridge added to the metro area.
So then I'll step back and just give you a few other points. So on these renderings, we want to make sure the user experience is being accounted for and meets legal requirements for railing heights, for railing strength, like Ryan mentioned. MnDOT has a spacing, the 4x4 inch openings over the highway. We got to account for all that stuff. On this graphic on the left, you can see that future noise wall. We're thinking about how that ties into that residential area. Again, some views from the users. There's that lookout in the bottom corner where people are taking pictures, and how is that going to interact? How can you see through that mesh and that arbor wood, and what's the spacing and the size of that wood, and how is it connected? Are a lot of things that we're trying to answer right now. We did make a change to push the ramp on the north side closer to the noise wall, so you didn't experience traffic when you're down next to Highway 62. So here you saw the two different things that we looked at. We've been looking at different alignments, different scenarios of spacings, and all those kind of things. Here's what Matt mentioned earlier. The lookout there on the left-hand side, just with the ramp without stairs, and then on the right-hand side, there is the stairs. So we're looking at the possibility of stairs because we heard that from the public where they wanted us to consider, and we're doing it on this side on the Roslyn Park and on the residential side. I'm concerned that there's going to be some budget challenges here, and the stairs may or may not fit within the budgets, and we got to figure out which elements we want to keep. So just make a note that we're studying that and trying to figure out exactly what those costs could be. And again, some renderings. These are great renderings of with and without those stairs. So on the left-hand side is that lookout over the park facing south. And then you have that stair feature there, which really adds a lot to it, but what's the cost to have that feature as part of the project? Where are we? We're here tonight giving you another update. We want to hire a bridge fabricator. So that's what Ryan had mentioned. With the cant of the steel truss, it's a unique feature that we just have a hard time estimating, and how do all those connection points work to get the arbor wood connected. So we're going to go out and get bids for a fabricator to bring them online to help us estimate and finish the plans, and they would get the contract to supply that steel truss bridge however we finish that design at that time. So that we think that's the next step versus trying to design and spec out everything to 100%, and then we got to do change orders with a fabricator. So this is the rough schedule of hiring that fabricator. We'll be coming back to you probably in March, late February, and then all the different percent plans that we have to go in front of MnDOT. They haven't seen it yet, and that's really the next steps here once we get a fabricator online to see how we do that. Still want to open bids early 2026 and build it in 2026. We have a $6 million budget, and we're trying to stay within that budget with all the renderings you saw and all the features that we've shared. Here's again that view from the south lookout, and any one of us would be happy to answer any questions that you may have at this point.
Yeah, that's an extraordinary elevation there. It's really, tells me that we headed in a really nice direction to have, to be able to not just deal with function but form as well was really important, and we ended up with something really special. So thanks to your architectural firm for the good work they did. Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you said at 30% you'll start talking to MnDOT. Is it worthwhile having an informal conversation just so that they know this is happening and then they can send up any red flags before we spend any money on it?
They know it's coming.
Okay.
They know there's a bridge coming. They know that we want to install a bridge, a new bridge, and they know there's some architectural differences with this one compared to some other bridges in the metro. That next step is really with the MnDOT bridge structural guys. They want to know how it's placed, how it's built, how those pieces are going to be attached. So it's really the structural piece that we review with MnDOT to get that final approval.
And will that be at that 30%?
Yep.
Okay.
They need more detail than what we got right now.
Okay, terrific,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
Member Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just curious, I definitely like the design, and I actually love the stairs too. But you talked about challenges there. Can you give like some relative idea of the cost increase to do those?
I don't think we know yet, because the interesting piece is the canted, right here. This 10-degree cant is really a little bit of an unknown for a steel truss bridge. It's not a common thing that you see in steel trusses, so it's really hard to estimate the actual cost of this.
Okay.
To take the next step and then estimate the cost of the stairs. So that's why we need to get that fabricator on board.
Okay.
And see what that premium is to go from a 90-degree to a 10-degree cant in the structure. So there's an option of maybe we would rather have stairs versus the cant, but then we'd work with Matt's team and make sure it still meets that architectural look that you've seen in the graphics. So it's those trade-offs, and we're not quite there and able to estimate it.
Okay, thank you.
Any estimate on the time taken, needed for construction? When they start in 2026, you said they'll be done in 2026, but
Correct, yeah, I mean, it's
Number of
not a
months?
big, I think it's 3 months, 4 months in that range. We want them in and out, but it has to happen during the summer.
And lead time for the fabrication of the steel truss too will be a big element, but that can usually start early, especially if we get a fabricator on board early.
Correct. We might pre-order that bridge, once we know.
Mr. Kralik, is that mesh, is that it looks like a stainless steel mesh, or?
It's a stainless steel mesh, so it's really transparent. We've used this on guardrails a lot because it allows for, it hits all of the code requirements, but it's also stainless steel, so not that we need to worry about, are the salt folks still here? We don't have to worry about that in this city, which is great. But it will help, especially
It has a nice aesthetic effect to it, too.
over a freeway, yeah. I think that's what we like about it because, it's beautiful up close, but it's also, it will allow those wood slats to be seen kind of from both sides and not necessarily compete with it.
Very good. Member Risser.
Regarding the wood slats, if I heard you correctly, they will last for about 40 years and then need to be replaced?
No, they don't need to be replaced. So I'll maybe restate that a little bit. So the process, we've used this, we use this out at the Treetop Trail on all of the benches in different areas. We just finished, if you actually want to see this product up close, Graco Park, which is on the Mississippi River. There's a park structure there that is completely clad in this product, and it's actually the same sort of color palette that you can see. So this, I can't get into the science of it, but basically I think, they're essentially like baking the wood, right? So it's thermally being modified, so the actual structure of the wood itself is changing, so it's getting rid of all that moisture, and it also doesn't accept moisture, so unlike a sort of untreated wood that over time would rot because moisture is being brought in and out, this just naturally or unnaturally resists it through that process.
So how long will it last before it needs to be replaced?
So it's possible that you might need to replace like a slat or two, but this will have close to the longevity of the bridge itself, right? You really shouldn't have to replace the wood unless there was damage to it.
It should be the same length of time as if we were using metal
It won't be the same as
elements?
concrete or metal. That would be different.
Okay.
But there would be, if we were to use metal, right, if there was a painted metal, there's going to be maintenance on that over time. This, because it's natural wood and we're letting it go to that natural state, it will show like all wood over time. It's sort of a patina, if you will, but it wouldn't be like a painted aluminum or a painted steel that would have to be repainted over time, or a stained wood that would have to be restained. It can be left alone.
There was other options where it could be stained, and we didn't want to have to do that over and over again. So this was the one that had the longest lifespan, and we want to ensure that we can have access when we need to do some maintenance to it. But we want a product that lasts a long time.
Thank you.
Councilmember Agnew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some of the visuals made it kind of hard to tell, but how see-through will it be?
Sure.
And I'm thinking of a couple of situations, right? Like seeing the highway underneath, but also if you're going up one side and you have your one kid in the stroller and the other one that likes to run ahead, are you able to keep that line of sight for safety purposes?
No, it's a great question. I'm just looking at these wood slats behind you, trying to see if I can explain it through those, but it won't quite work. Definitely as you're moving, I mean, it's what makes us really dynamic, right? As you move around and are looking at the wood, depending on sort of your location to those slats, it will become a more opaque, but it's, as you're moving through it, yeah, I mean, these are actually pretty good where you can still see it's generally transparent. I think we have a 4-inch spacing is where we're at with the wood itself right now.
8 inch
Or
on center.
8 inches. So it's relatively transparent. I mean, there's moments, obviously, as you move sort of further away, and if you're at a sort of acute angle to it, it'll appear more opaque. But generally, for the concerns that you're bringing up, you're going to be able to see around.
Wonderful, thank you.
Good. Thank you, gentlemen. Yeah, thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for the update.
Thanks.
All right, we've got one public hearing matter this evening. We're moving on now from the portion of the agenda that we've been in with special presentations. And now we're on to public hearings. We've got, as I mentioned, one matter there, and that is the Resolution 2025-11, which is a potential approval of the preliminary and final plat, and Resolution 2025-10, vacating a public utility easement, and Director Teague has this matter.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. This is a site you're all familiar with, as back last November, November 6th, the City Council passed a resolution, Resolution 2024-90, that approved the acquisition of one of the parcels that we're looking at this evening, and also placed a conservation easement over that site that's good for 99 years. That resolution also bypassed the statutory requirement for Planning Commission review on the acquisition and disposal of property. That resolution has been included in your packet. Also, that same night, on November 6th, the council passed Resolution 2024-91 that approved special assessments for 7 properties within this area. This is the site that the city is to purchase and be repaid back over time by those, with interest by those 7 residents. The action this evening is just for the subdivision. Those other decisions had already been made, so it's just the replat of the properties. So here's a look at the site. It's up in the northwest quadrant of the city, just south of Mirror Lake. It's zoned R1, single dwelling unit district. There's a look at the 3 sites involved. Note that the one site, 5235, is a vacant lot. The home at 6012 is located right along the lot line. Here's a look at an aerial. You can see the site is vacant and heavily wooded. Here's a look at the site from the street, from Highwood. Also want to point out that there's some steep slopes with this site. You can see the contours through this area here that have made this site difficult to develop over time. It had been held in common ownership with the property to the west, but has recently been sold. So again, here's a look at the existing lots. And the proposal here is to essentially shift lot lines. So from the original lot, the lot to the west would receive this area here, that steep slope area. The lot to the south would obtain this area here. And the easement that we're asking to be vacated this evening is in the hashed line here. It's our standard drainage and utility easement located along lot lines. There's no utilities within that easement. New easements would be established along the new lot lines. So here's a look at the resulting replat of these 3 lots. The 2 lots are getting larger, and the outlot that the city is obtaining is reduced in size and becomes unbuildable. So again, the purpose of that request was to establish that conservation easement over the outlot. It can't be used for park purposes, trails, structures can't be built. This is all language within the existing easement. And then also to vacate that utility easement and establish the new ones with the replat. The Planning Commission reviewed the plat and did recommend approval of the replat. So the ask this evening is that you adopt Resolution 2025 vacating that easement and adopt Resolution 2025-11, which establishes the replat. And the property owner, the applicant, is here to answer any questions, and staff can answer questions as well.
I think this was something that you discussed with us before, that this would be the next step for us, would be based on what you described before as what the replatting would involve. So 2 issues to address then, right? The approved replatting and then the vacation of the utility easement. That's all that's in front of us this evening.
That's correct.
Okay. Questions for Director Teague? Member Risser?
It's been really challenging following this, and I did listen to the Planning Commission, and one of the things that they noted, or they asked, is why did this go before council before it came to us? And the response they got was because the applicant wanted assurances that it would be approved. Could you elaborate on how often we take this route and the legitimacy of it?
Yeah, this is definitely a unique circumstance. We talked a little bit in November and in April when it was first discussed about somewhat similar situation where the city purchased an outlot and established an easement over it. But in this case, before officially shifting those lot lines, the applicant wanted some assurances as to whether this idea was acceptable by the city council. So those decisions were made, the assessment agreements, the establishment of the easement. This last step is just the shifting of the lot lines. This is definitely a unique circumstance.
Okay, personally, and I went back and I listened to that meeting. I also listened to the meeting that happened back in April where the idea was first pitched to us. So it came to council 2 times before it went to the Planning Commission. And this is a land use issue. And I'm kicking myself because I know it was a subdivision. I knew that in April. I had a lot going on. I had surgery the next day. And I should have said, wait a minute, we're asking for a subdivision. This needs to go before planning, before it comes to us. And so we as a body did not have the feedback from the Planning Commission before we were asked to make a decision about it. And so we as a body did not get to hear from the public. There was no public hearing about it. And so I think had I known, and I should have known, I've served on the Planning Commission, I should have realized that this was not the way to go, that it had to go before planning, before it came to us, and I didn't catch that. And I wish I did, because if I had caught that, I would have said something. I don't know if it would have changed the vote, but I have a lot of concerns about this development, including the cost, including the way the expenses being divided up with the neighbors. And none of that was something, and the other thing too is this whole idea that they wanted assurances that it would be approved. How frequently do we offer this pathway to developers, that they can bypass planning, go to city council, get a read? And I feel like our feedback was not informed. So this is really concerning to me.
I think there was an understanding that the lot lines needed to be shifted in order to accommodate that, with part of the property going to the west and part of it to the south.
True, but this whole idea, this bundle of ideas to create a conservation easement, we don't have a conservation easement program. To do it on a site that is 0.21 acres in size, when, and one commissioner noted, the size of the smallest conservation easements that he could find were 8 acres. We don't have any standards in place. And if this is going to sort of set the bar for how we're going to do conservation easements, we're talking about over $600,000 an acre for the city to purchase land to create a conservation easement. And then there were concerns at the Planning Commission that the public wasn't going to have access to this space, so it wasn't really necessarily a public benefit. And I'm sitting here thinking about our budget, all the time that's gone into it. This is the 4th meeting for this particular proposal. And, you know, terms that were used, one person said this seemed like a pet project. Another person wondered why it was advancing. And if we're going to open this up to this site, this is not the only wooded site on residential property where someone might want to get $150,000 from the city. And I feel like there's so much going on here. We're setting precedent. That was a concern at the Planning Commission. And so the way we're doing things is very concerning to me, and I want to say that. And I'll stop there and let other people ask questions.
Well, yeah, I think it's necessary based on the comments you made. Is there a cost to the city for this?
The city would purchase the Outlot A, as shown on the screen, for $150,000. Per the assessment agreement that the council approved back in November, the city would be reimbursed plus interest.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, there's no net cost to the city.
Correct.
If we look at the big picture of this thing, what we had was several neighbors that came that wanted to preserve a piece of property in their neighborhood in a natural state. We're willing to buy it and pay for it. And the methodology we used was something that we had done once before in the 20 years I've been involved. So it is indeed a unique circumstance. But it's the neighbors that are paying for this.
That's correct.
To keep that in a natural state with a conservation easement for the benefit of the community overall. And there's no cost to the city.
That's right. And the city then owns that site.
And the city owns the site.
Yep.
Yeah, and they're paying for it.
Correct.
Right. And we've already approved all that.
Correct.
All we're doing tonight is doing the replatting and vacating that utility easement that runs along the new property line.
That's correct.
All right. Others have comments or questions? This is a public hearing matter. I think we've got one of the neighbors available for comment or questions if necessary. Because this is a public hearing matter, I'm going to now open it up for potential public testimony. You'll have 3 minutes to testify regarding this matter, if you wish to testify.
Jim Groats, 5513 Park Place. I wish to call to your attention Chapter 429 of Minnesota Statutes on Special Assessments and the Minnesota League of Cities Special Assessment Toolkit. I quote from the toolkit. Special assessments are a charge imposed on properties for a particular improvement that benefits the owners of the selected properties. They are, to quote again, they are a levy a city uses to finance or partially finance a particular public improvement program. There is a special benefit test that must be followed according to the League of Cities. In the case of this property, there is no improvement that will be constructed as part of this financing. This appears to be a case where the property owner seeks low-interest financing the city might provide. The financing would pay for land acquisition and not for improvements. Please show me in statute where this is allowed. This should not proceed. It appears the requirements of the law for special assessments do not fit the request before you tonight. Per Minnesota Data Practices Act, please provide me a copy of the written legal opinion on which you are relying for this to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Groats. Anyone else in the audience wish to testify?
Lori Groats, 5513 Park Place. I wanted to give my opinion on this project tonight because I've never had the opportunity to give an opinion to the council on this. Back in, I think it was in April of last year when this was first proposed, Member Jackson said, "Oh, it's an oak savanna. This is beautiful. It's a great opportunity for the city." And I thought to myself, okay, you better go take a look at this to see what the great opportunity is for the benefit of the city. So I dragged my husband with me and went over there and took a look. I saw a bunch of dead trees laying on a piece of land with other trees in there, a lot of scrub, a lot of brush. I'm guessing probably what it was used for. Neighbors let their dogs run in there. So my first thought was, I don't see this as a benefit, but it does remind me of another property that I saw one time, 5019 Knob Hill, next door to the mayor's house. There was a piece of property there, about the same size. It was a little larger, but the back end of the property was in the pond. And so it was about the same size, scrubby trees, really steep slope on it. Public is going to think it's not buildable. And it sat unbuildable for years. But then a developer came in, bought it for $250,000, built a big house on it. This year, in property taxes, they paid over $22,000. Next year, they'll be paying on an assessed value of $1.7 million. What's the benefit to the public on this property? I don't see any benefit. We should let somebody try to build on that if they want to. The homeowner in the back has already purchased it for $300,000. He wants more property for the back of his yard. A neighbor on the other side wants a piece of it. So what's left over? Oh, let's have the city buy it, and we'll call it a benefit, and then we'll get low interest rate, and we'll pay them back. Sounds like a good deal? For those property owners, yes. For taxpayers, no. There isn't going to be anything in there that the taxpayers can use. There's not going to be benches or anything. So I kept thinking there's no benefit to the public, and I see the benefit to the homeowners there. And, it's he paid $300,000 for the lot. So if he hadn't bought it, somebody else might have bought it for $300,000. So then what kind of a house would they build? Perhaps the neighbors didn't want to have a house in there that might cost
I need to have you wrap up your comments. You're over time.
Okay. Well, I think that the process has been wrong, and there's no benefit to the public. And
Gotcha.
If you honor this, people are not going to be happy. Thank you.
Hi there. I'm Andrew Carter, 6012 Pine Grove Road. I'm the owner of the property in question. And just to, level set everybody, the previous owner of the house to the northwest of myself, now owned by the Bennetts, also owned the empty lot. And when, her goal for owning that empty lot for nearly 40 years was to keep it a green space. So when she passed away, roughly 4.5 years ago, maybe 3.5 years ago, the neighborhood aligned and said, hey, we want to represent this woman and try to keep this space green. And I was the one that ended up purchasing a lot. While it was for sale for about 9 months, all of the neighbors tried to think of a way to kind of purchase it together and then split it and share it. And we couldn't figure out a great way to do it. So we did use the Oak Lane kind of process as a template. I'll agree with Councilmember Risser a bit here, where the building commission last week, what came out of that was, maybe we need to just have a process, a better process for something like that. So I do agree with that. This process has been very long, like you all know. But really, we're trying to preserve green space. And in a first-ring suburb, there's not a home run, okay? There isn't an 8-acre tract that is an opportunity. We're not in Lakeville or Farmington where we have, a 40-acre plot that we can turn green. We've got to hit singles as a community, right? We've got to do bits and pieces. And by the way, the neighbors that are part of this, we are the public. So, directly, yes, the land is there. Can that land move? No. Can the wildlife within that land move? Yes. Hawks, eagles, owls, deer, raccoons, coyote or two. They roam everywhere, turkeys. So the natural space does benefit everybody. And I think not wanting more green space and going, wishing something against the climate action plans, to me, just doesn't make sense. So again, the goal is to keep it green space. Like Director Teague mentioned, my current property is 5 feet from the property line. That's not to code anymore. So I'd like to bump that out just to get it within code. I think that's a smart thing to do. Same with Mr. Bennett's. On the vacant lot, there is a fence, there's a retaining wall that the previous owner built. By bumping that out, now that's in code. And then what's left, right, is unbuildable. So can it be an address anymore? I don't think so. So this was kind of one of the solutions is how do we keep it green? How do we keep the city from, you're not buying it, you're financing it. We're gifting you this land to keep it green really for, a long, long time. So that's kind of, just to level set everybody, that's where we're coming from.
To emphasize that last point, I understand that the neighbors are paying for the property and donating it to the city.
Correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Thank you.
Hello again. We'll swap microphones. Janie Weston, 6136 Brookview. I was here at that November meeting when this was on the agenda before, and kind of had, this is off. It felt very off to me. The resulting size of this outlot A, which is what the city would have as a conservation easement, would be 9,453 square feet, less than half, 48% of its original size after it's split into 3 parts, with 2 of the parts essentially absorbed by the neighboring owners. And I can understand why the neighboring owners are interested in expanding on their property. They have good reasons for it. But Hennepin County has a conservation easement program. And I know this because I looked into what this is regarding my father's Minnetonka home property 2 years ago. His property was 58.2% larger than 5235 West Highwood Drive. The idea at that time was to split off roughly half of its 33,958 square feet to about half to 16,975 square feet, so 0.39 acres. And it would become a Hennepin County conservation easement piece of land in perpetuity, the same idea. This was to assure preservation of the trees, wildlife in general. Before he moved out of his house, he was 100 years old. The discussion did not go very far with the person from the county because I quickly learned that the required minimum size for a conservation easement is much larger. It's acres of land. A fraction of an acre just plain didn't qualify. That was end of discussion. The Outlot A property size for 5235 West Highwood, after splitting it, is 9,453 square feet. That is only 0.217 acres. Obviously, Hennepin County would never accept it as a conservation easement due to its very small size. Why in the world is this okay for Edina to take on with that status? It doesn't make sense. I don't agree with the city taking it on. to be responsible for the inevitable buckthorn that would end up propagating in there. The city's having enough difficulty keeping up with what's even in our parks and spending a lot of money on that now. And also removing any other invasive species that become problematic, which will happen if it is not allowed for the neighbors to use it or help manage it in cahoots with the city. So it also doesn't provide any tax revenue when the city owns it. Right now, we've had a lot of screaming about how everyone's taxes are going up. The process is flawed, and
You're over your 3 minutes, I
Okay.
guess.
And
Member Jackson has reminded me.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to wrap up your comments, please?
The equivalent size of this outlot piece of property is the same size within 3 feet of a 70-foot by 135-foot lot that is buildable. That a decent house can be put on
All
something
right.
like that.
Yeah, thank
So,
you, thank you. I've
Okay.
let you go over quite a bit.
It's off.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? All right, let's check to see if we have anybody online that wants to testify.
I do not have any callers.
Okay. Anybody else in the audience? All right, is there a motion to close the public hearing in this matter?
So moved. Second.
Member Agnew moves and Member Jackson seconds the closing of the public hearing in this matter. Any further discussion with regard to that particular motion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The public hearing in this matter is closed. A couple of questions came up that I wrote down. One was, I think, asked the question really, how were we able to use a special assessment methodology with respect to this particular property? I don't know if that's a Attorney Kendall question or staff question.
Oh, Mayor, I can answer that. Excuse me. Apparently, the neighbors felt there was benefit to their properties because they agreed to the special assessments and waived any challenge to the special benefit test. So they must have felt that there was special benefit to their properties, and they've agreed to pay those assessments accordingly.
All right. And then with respect to the city, does the city require a minimum lot size for use of a conservation easement? No.
I'm not sure if that question is for me, but I'm not aware of any ordinance or other authority that requires a minimum lot size for the city. And I'm not familiar with the Hennepin County's program, but the city does not have a similar requirement.
And we're under our rules, not Hennepin County rules. Is that correct?
Correct.
They're under our ordinance.
That's
And then,
correct. And it becomes a non-conforming lot, and that's the reason that we put it in the outlot status, that it's not buildable
Right.
as part of the subdivision.
And to that issue, I would say that, having been out there on the site, I think, well, they did have it listed for a while. The trustee had it listed, that was also the executor. And you did have one potential buyer, but then when he put the lot on, put the house, brought you the site plan with the house configured on the lot, he didn't meet any requirements, as I recall.
Right, there would have been a number of variances required, and then the cutting into the steep slopes was an issue as well.
Member Jackson, you may have some other things that you want to address here. I've got a couple more, but go ahead.
No, please
No,
go
you
ahead. Well, I guess I was thinking with Hennepin County, there were 1.3 million people in Hennepin County, and the administration of every estate wanting to donate some land, I think would be unwieldy in a hurry. We're a much smaller unit than the county is, and I think that has more to do with the administration of a conservation easement than it does to do with any sort of legal requirements. They just would probably get lots of requests for little itty-bitty pieces of land, and that would be prohibitively expensive for the county.
What I was going to point out was, too, I think I've been involved in matters on the council where we've done conservation easements along some of the lakes that are maybe 25, 50 feet wide that run the width of a lot. And so it's just a very narrow strip that becomes a conservation easement. And here we've got a 0.21 acres piece of property that's, Ms. Weston may be right in her per square footage calculations, I don't know, but regardless, I think it's 0.21 acres. Anyone care to, Member Risser, go ahead, you comment?
Just to follow up on the idea that the residents have waived all applicable assessment procedural requirements that the state has. I didn't realize that residents could just say, I waive these requirements, and they could go away. Because if the state requires them, I would think, you couldn't necessarily do that, especially when it comes to special assessment, because that would be a workaround so that you could obtain a financing mechanism. So I guess I find that a little puzzling, but then I'm not an attorney, so.
Did you have another comment, Member Jackson?
Well, I guess the right goes to the people who are being asked to pay the money. So if they are not going to sue to challenge it, then nobody has standing to challenge it. So that's how that works. So it really is the people who are paying the assessment are the ones protected by the law. So they said, we like this. This is a public benefit, so there's nobody to sue because they're the ones who are being protected.
I want to go back. Member Risser, go ahead.
But with special assessments, yes, it's the people who are being assessed, but it's open to the public as a whole. And so I don't think it's necessarily just limited to those who are being assessed. You might have other people who would want to weigh in on this, particularly as we don't have a conservation easement program. I could imagine that there might be residents in Edina who might want to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this.
Director Teague, I want to go back to this issue that Member Risser raised early on, was that why didn't this go to the planning, or why didn't it have to go to planning? And the way the assertion was made was that it was that people wanted to come here first because they thought they'd get the deal done here, but that wasn't really what happened. They wanted to. You had explained it, I think, in a good way, that before they went too far with this idea, they wanted a little bit more information, which could only come from the council.
That's correct, yeah.
And was this a matter that by necessity would have had to go to the Planning Commission first?
Just the plat, the decision whether to do purchase property, that's a decision of the city council. Really, the purview of the Planning Commission is just the plat.
Member Pierce.
So one of the questions I have, we've already given some levels of approval on this. And so the question I have is, if the resolutions fail today, what legal jeopardy is the city in, given that we've given some prior approvals?
Well, I can't speak for the individuals who've already agreed to all these conditions and acted in reliance on that, but you'd have to basically unwind the whole arrangement. This is just the last step. The council did previously approve back in November all of these actions except for the plat, which is kind of a formality because you've already agreed to purchase the land and place the conservation easement on that land. So this has just designated the land that's subject to all those agreements. So it would be a major unwinding process, and I imagine all the individuals who've spent all this time and money working on it would have objection to that.
Would have an objection to that, is that what you said?
Yes.
Is that the last thing you said? Okay, thank you. And then from a process standpoint, what process would have led us to have this level of conversation earlier in the process than tonight at the last step? And I know given the public hearing, having that earlier certainly would have raised some issues, but just from a process standpoint.
Well, I mean, I think there were quite a number of conversations about it, but the issue is that I don't think the neighbors wanted to replat this land and redraw the boundary lines until they were fairly certain that it was going to be approved, because otherwise they would have, a lot that was unbuildable. They wouldn't be able to use it for other purposes. So I mean, I think it was reasonable for them to seek some indication of how it was going to go before they applied to replat the land. The only thing that happened was it looked for, at some point, like this could be done like an administrative lot split, and then it turned out it had to be done through a replatting process, which had to go to the planning commission. So, you know, ideally, maybe that would have happened earlier, but either way, I think the individuals, the applicants, would have wanted some indication on whether this was going to go forward, because they would not have applied to replat that land unless they had some high confidence that this was actually going to be approved. The conservation easement and all the assessments, all those other pieces would have to be approved before they would want to replat the land.
Okay. Member Risser.
If you go back and you look at the packet for November 6th, there's nothing about platting or replatting. It's using just a basic lot line adjustment in order to make this happen. And when I looked at the packet and read that, I did contact the city and asked, you know, can we actually do this? When I look at code, it looks like we have to plat it. And so, and I got a response that said, you may be right. And so it was really late in the process, I think, where it changed and then, oh, we have to do the platting. And so I am really confused by all of this, because I don't know if from the get-go the idea was construct the process so that it can go before council before it goes to planning. If it had from the very beginning been done in a way where platting was involved, our statutes require it to go to planning first and then to go to council. So by doing it this way, it was possible for the applicant to get a read on how council was feeling. But again, council was not informed by concepts that planning commission raised. And you can say, you know, this, all that the planning commission is responsible for is just the plat and only the plat alone, and that the planning commission makes decisions about subdividing land apart from the context in which it's being asked. And I have a really hard time believing that. Thank you.
Well, I think he was referring to this particular circumstance. Is that correct, Director Teague?
That's correct. With the planning commission needs to make a recommendation on the plat. Those other actions are decisions of the city council.
At least as I mentioned earlier, I had a recollection that we had discussed at the point that it would have to be replatted at one point in time, because I remember that Mr. Carter wanted to be in compliance on his back rear lot setback line. So it seems to me that we had talked about the fact that we'd be doing some replatting. I don't know if we knew about the vacation of the easement at that point in time, but I think we knew about replatting. I don't know if others have that recollection. But do you remember that, Director?
Yes, yeah, that's my recollection, that we did talk about the fact that there still was one more step after those actions.
Member Agnew has a thought.
Thank you. And I've been kind of quiet on this one because I have felt kind of all along like this is kind of, I don't know if I'll say weird, but interesting. It's one of those unique situations that we sometimes are faced as a council. And that means that it's going to be difficult to make a decision. And I personally am trying not to over-fixate on the process. Like, yes, there is always room for process improvement, but as a city, it's also reasonable that we don't have a well ironed out process for something that doesn't come up very often. So it's not an excuse, but it's also like an ROI on investing into new processes. And so I do appreciate kind of the position that we're in as a city and trying to navigate, okay, this is a newer idea or a different idea. How do we accommodate it? And so then, as I try and kind of step away from the process side of it, I just look at, like, what are we doing here? What is the impact and who is this benefiting? And I think that was also some of the concerns of people in the community, of wanting to know what is the benefit to the community of being able to do this. And for me, the reason that I ended up supporting it is and I mean, you know, in previous discussions when we had voted on it, was really thinking about the tree canopy. And I think it was right in the midst of all those other discussions that we were having of how important that is to us as a community. And tonight we had members from the high school come in and talk about the climate action plan and the importance of that. And on the other hand, right, I always have in the back of my mind some of our other priorities as city, such as affordable and attainable housing, and looking at, you know, where is there opportunity to add in incrementally more housing into our community that it isn't there today. And so when I was kind of balancing those two in my mind, and again, just kind of going through my own process here, green space versus is this something where we could add one additional incremental unit of housing, a house specifically. And the testimony that we had heard is that it's a very difficult lot to build on due to the changes in elevation and all of the other factors of just the shape and the format of the lot. And so even if it were buildable, I don't think it would be an affordable house. It would be something that would be very costly to put in there. And so in balancing those two, I felt for me, I did see benefit to our community given the priority of the climate action plan and our focus on the tree canopy to say, yes, this makes sense. I think especially knowing that there is no cost to us as a city. And so that's just a little bit of my thought process, and I know that Manager Neal also maybe wanted to respond, but I did want to, just to get it out there for us to continue having the conversation, I wanted to make a motion to adopt resolution number 2025-11 and 2025-10.
All right, very good. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to affirm that Councilmember Agnew, I think, made a very succinct statement about the overall nature of this transaction. When we did this for the first time on Oak Lane in 2020 or 2021, we had to create a process, and we thought it was creative. It allowed the addition of new public land into the city that was being paid for by all the private property owners around it. So I honestly thought at the end of that process that we did a good thing, but I didn't think we'd do it again, right? And here, just a few years later, we have another opportunity to do it again. And I think it probably would be wise for us now that we've done this. I've never done it before in many years. Now we've done it twice in about 5 years. It's probably time that we should develop some sort of procedure and protocol if people want to do this more in the future. Because preserving those forested lots like this or forested areas, we do see is supporting many of the values in our comprehensive plan and our climate action plan.
Okay, thank you, Manager Neal. Now I'm going to turn back to Member Risser, who may have had a comment here in discussion.
I am wondering where, you know, the $150,000 is coming from. Also, I think there is going to be expense, and there was note that we may need to put a fence all around this site. You know, and I think Resident Weston had a good point about, you know, there is going to be some maintenance that is going to be necessary. We do have a lot of areas around Edina that are not being maintained, and I think about the city property that is along Valley View and all of the buckthorn that is in there. And so the idea that there's absolutely zero cost to this, I think is hard to believe. The other thing is that we were talking about a part of Edina where we have a very rich, lush tree canopy. And are we prepared, you know, to do this kind of special assessment agreement throughout Edina and maybe target some of the areas in Edina that have really meager tree canopies, but, you know, perhaps have lots where you might even have smaller, you know, if we're going to go for 0.21, would we go for 0.1? How small are we willing to go? So there's that. But I think I pretty much clarified where I am right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Risser. Member Jackson?
Yes, I'd like to just clarify. It's my understanding that a conservation easement means you're setting it aside and there's no maintenance, there's no structure. it just, it is left to nature. Is that correct, Manager Neal? Yes. Okay, thank you.
No trails.
No trails, no fences, no buckthorn removal, nothing. It's just left in nature's hands.
And we're getting a nice piece of property that somebody else is paying for
That's right.
because they want to donate it. Okay. We got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yes, Member Pierce.
I appreciate the conversation. So just from an additional perspective, I actually don't like when we have issues that come before us, and I personally feel like we are doing something that maybe we shouldn't be doing. Like maybe we should have followed a more, I don't know, upfront process, more thorough process. We don't have a process for it, as Manager Neal said. And so whenever we're in those situations, it's different to me for us to have a debate on whether we think something is the right thing for the community, or should it be 5 stories versus 4 stories, those types of discussions. Because we're having those within a construct of, we know what the variances are, we know what the ordinance says, and then we're having a discussion within that context. And so when I looked at this originally, I was excited about it. I thought, well, yeah, this makes sense. And then when there are challenges to, are there aspects of this that are legal? Do we have the right to do some of this? I get uncomfortable when we then have to have a conversation about it. And so I would prefer, in cases where those things are in question, more clear direction on it. And I don't feel that way with some of these questions. And there's oftentimes, I shouldn't say oftentimes, there have been times when we get the answer of, well, you know, it's to your discretion. If you want to do it, you can. I don't like making decisions when that is the case. I prefer to have more direct, clear lines from a legal perspective. And so I would have asked to actually have Attorney Kendall go back, take these questions and bring back, all right, legally, here is what you have the discretion to do. I would have preferred to have that versus just having the discussion on the dais and then taking up the motion with that clarity. And I'm just being transparent. It would make me feel better with taking a decision in that regard. And you can argue that, yep, Member Pierce, you should have asked these questions. But in all honesty, I wasn't even thinking about it from a procedural standpoint until today when the question came up. And so that's kind of how I feel about it. I don't know what that means for the motion. I don't know if we have to make a decision on this tonight or not.
We've got a motion and a second on the table.
Right. So that's where I am right now.
Yeah. So what were let me ask you, what were the issues that were raised that were legal in nature that you don't think you got a sufficient answer from Attorney Kendall? Because it's often a situation where we can't anticipate everything that might come up with respect to a legal inquiry, and we ask for an opinion from him, and that's why he's here, to answer these questions that may come up in the course of a meeting. So what?
Yeah, I think
that you don't feel settled on.
And it could be in the delivery. I don't know.
Or the process, maybe?
Of the process, it could be that. And we've covered the fact that we don't really have a process for this. And so that doesn't, to your point, mean in cases where there isn't an established process, then we can't take a decision, because we certainly can. And so I'm not suggesting that. Yeah.
Okay. So let's step back a little bit on this process issue. The reason that we handle it the way we did handle it is because it didn't require a public hearing on the initial aspects of this. Is that correct?
That's correct. The part that needs the public hearing is the plat.
Yeah. So when we got to the plat phase, and I think usually when we vacate a public utility easement, it requires a public hearing.
That's correct.
So we got to the point where a public hearing was necessary on those two particular issues. But
On the
I suppose
plat
if we
and
want to
the
create a
easement.
process in the future where we have a public hearing up front, we could do that.
Yeah, and we did talk a little bit about that at Planning Commission with the zoning ordinance update that's coming. We thought this would be a good process to add in to that amendment, to those code changes.
On the plat and the easement, is that what you said?
Yep.
Okay.
That's why we're having a public hearing, because both of those actions require a public hearing. But what we did before didn't. We didn't do anything wrong. But I get what you're saying. You don't like to sit up here and feel like we might have done something that was irregular.
Right.
But I can also tell you that I've had very experienced people in the past tell me, no, it doesn't apply to this situation, so never mind. Any further discussion? Member Risser.
It's odd that we have a project that has been basically divided up so that parts of it are presented to us at one point and we're asked to weigh in. And then later, the part with the public hearing comes up. And I really don't think that that's something that is necessarily great policy. And I really also think in terms of, we're having a discussion about the budget and how do we reduce costs and all of that. And I really think it makes very little sense to do it this way. And I would hope that we don't do it this way in the future. And, dividing up a project, we should get it all at once so we can view it comprehensively. And, if there's any part of it that's supposed to go to the Planning Commission first, it needs to go to the Planning Commission so that we can make the best informed decision possible. I think that's just really basic.
Yeah, I think Director Teague can raise this issue with the Planning Commission as they work on some of the zoning code work modifications that they're suggesting. Okay, any further discussion? Oh, Member Pierce, anything further?
I don't think so. As I stated, originally I thought, when this was first brought to us, I thought it was a great idea. So I'm just trying to wrestle with why I feel the way I feel now, when I still think this is a good idea. But I suppose that's what being up here is about, right? You have to take a decision and support that decision. And as I've said before, I like to be able to sit across the table from someone and explain why I voted the way I did and feel good about that.
Member Jackson.
So I don't know if this would be helpful for the discussion or not, but I'm going to say it anyways. I always think about what's the public benefit being served. Ultimately, we are here for health and safety of the members of our community. If we're going to subdivide a lot into something that's small, we want to make sure we're not looking at overcrowding. This is not a situation where we're going to have a lot so small that's going to be overcrowded. I don't see any health and safety issues in doing this. I don't really know why. I assume that's why the Planning Commission looks at platting to see if it's inconsistent with the overall plan of the city. So I just think about what's the public benefit being served here. We're preserving the tree canopy, and the neighbors are all in favor of it and they're paying for it. So I just kind of think about who benefits and who would be harmed by doing this. I don't see harm to anybody, and I see a lot of benefit. So that's how I make my decision.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. So back to the issues that you raised, Member Pierce, and some of the comments that Manager Neal made, and all, I think, triggered out of Member Agnew's comments about we used a process that was kind of customized to the situation, and it's a rarity, as Manager Neal said, that we've had this happen. Happened twice in years I've been doing this. Somewhat close together, I guess, if you want to think about that in terms of 5 years. So we had this unique process that we used, but it was an appropriate process. And it does make me think about what the county engineer, now retired at Hennepin County, told me one time. He said, Jim, don't ever let a concern about process, or if you use a unique process, don't let that concern cause you to kill a good project. Don't ever let process kill a good project. So I've always had that in the back of my head too. And so here in this situation, we used something that was a little bit unique, well, actually quite unique and quite creative to be able to look at this issue and see if it made sense. And I think the process was not only creative, but it was solid myself. And I think it's a good project. It's a good notion. I intend to support it. So we've got a motion and a second in front of us. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of resolution 2025-11 and 2025-10 say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motions carry. Both resolution 2025-11 approving the preliminary and final plat and resolution 2025-10 vacating the public utility easement are approved. Thank you. Okay. Let's move on. Now that takes care of the public hearing portion of the agenda. And now we've got some donations that we need to, and my computer isn't letting me bring up that resolution. Yeah, I've got a gray screen. I tap on it, it goes to color and it's showing me nothing. Okay, that'd be helpful. Thank you. Member Agnew. All right, we've got motion 2025-13 accepting donations on behalf of the city. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 2025-13?
So moved.
I second.
Got a motion by Member Jackson, second by Member Agnew to adopt resolution 2025-13. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of resolution 2025-13 say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. We've got one donation this reporting period. It's Aurora in France to the Edina Senior Center, a $250 gift for coffee for the coffee cart. Thank you, Member Agnew, for that assistance. And now we have Andrew Scipione with us. He's got a work plan initiative he wants to modify.
Do you both want one?
No, we can share. We're good. Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I'm joined here today by Commissioner Grant Wright from the Transportation Commission. He's going to talk about the initiative that he led as part of last year's work plan related to traffic safety infrastructure research and recommendations. So with that, I'll turn it over to Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Scipione. Commissioner, welcome.
Thank you. Grant Wright, first time speaking with you all. Thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Been on the commission for almost 2 years now. And for our 2024 work plan, we had one item that you all charged us with was traffic safety infrastructure research and recommendations. So, thank you. So we ended up taking a look at what other cities were doing and came up with some really good ideas and reinforcement for what Edina is already doing. Excited to report on this to you tonight. Before we do that, I want to play a little game. It's 2 truths and a lie. So you can decide which one is the lie. Hold your responses and we'll come back to this at the end of it. But first one is, I live in southwest Edina near Braemar Golf Course. Second little factoid is that I have young kids who are often out and about on our neighborhood streets and enjoy, being a part of the community. And then the third is that I never exceed the speed limit. We'll come back to this later. So what did we do as part of this work plan item? We went out and talked to people who were working in Richfield, Minneapolis, and did research in St. Paul, City of Bloomington online to find out what they were doing around traffic calming and keeping their cities and their streets safe. And why did we do this? Why is it so important? Well, you see each year when we do every time we do the quality of life survey, it comes back as something that traffic safety is incredibly important to the residents of Edina. Sitting in our commission meetings, we hear regularly in community comment from people about their concerns about safety on our streets and people blowing through stop signs and whatnot. We see in the open-ended responses in the quality of life survey, people voicing these same concerns. It's a reality. It's, I'm sure, as members of council and city staff and the traffic committee that meets as well, we're all hearing this from the community on the regular. So it should be no shock that this is something that the commission was interested in learning more about what other cities are doing. So in speaking with all these cities, it's all detailed in the report provided, so I'm not going to go through that in detail. You all have that to read. But the macro takeaways, what more could we do, is three things. One is the city did a great job a few years ago rolling out the new Drive 25 campaign and lowering the speed limit is a smart move to make, and good effort was put into it at the time. It seems that some of the momentum may have been lost over the last couple of years around communication around Drive 25. Think about the fact that we have new drivers coming, they're getting their licenses all the time on the roads, and we have new people moving to the community from other places that may have higher speed limits. There's attrition on our roadways all the time. We need to continue to remind people that this is something that we have embraced as a community. It's important to us. So there's a reason why we did this. We need to make sure that everybody is taking the time and slowing down and being very thoughtful drivers. Also, what came out of our research here was the community engagement aspect of this in all the different, in Richfield and Minneapolis especially. They're intaking a lot of input and they're having a lot of dialogue. They have the police go out and speak with residents and do the education part of it. Communication will not fix everything. I'm in communications, it's part of my work. I know that it can't do everything. It is part of the solution. So what else can be done? Piloting quick build traffic calming solutions. The real, permanent solutions are very expensive. But these quick build solutions, a lot of the cities are experimenting with these, and they can be executed in intersections for hundreds or low thousands of dollars in order to see how the community is going to react to these different solutions that are out there and see what's worth really investing in. Who's going to pay for that? Well, the hundreds or low thousands of dollars. There are plenty of grant programs, I'm sure many which the city has looked at one point in time or the other, but as part of the report that we provided a whole list of everything that we could find that the city, we think, should and continue to be looking at to fund these efforts. And then, so what do we mean by quick build solutions, just to make sure we're all on the same page? Speed humps, it's probably the most common thing that we hear as a commission from people is, hey, can you lay down some speed humps? Like, people are really ripping through here. We would really appreciate it. It doesn't seem like, as a driver, it doesn't seem like it's something very complicated to do. And actually, like the price of these, the quick research that I did was not incredibly, astronomical. So that's the most common one. Others, traffic circles, realize that the city has experimented with some of these already. And then they may not be appropriate for every intersection. It may not have the space for it. But continue, the macro thrust here is like to continue to look at this stuff and where can we do this stuff? Or maybe if a traffic circle won't work, is it a four-way stop that you could experiment with? Especially in like a straight shot like on 70th or 66, when you can really, you can get going if you don't watch yourself there. Curb extensions or bump outs, it's paint on the asphalt. It's these bollards, plastic devices you can put in. Experiment with it. See where this is going to help. Where it's not going to make a difference, take them out then. It's a low-cost alternative. The city has done some of this. The point is to do more. Same with pedestrian refuge islands, incredibly effective ways to give people confidence to be able to cross the street. And then narrowing lanes is a big part of the city's strategy already, so kudos there. But another, back to 70th, think about opportunities for chicanes to kind of like slow the traffic so that you have to kind of navigate some things. Side benefit is that it can create these dedicated bike lanes, if you're all into that. Our chair of our commission, Andy Lewis, came and I believe spoke about that a few weeks ago. And then dynamic speed display signs. I've seen a few of these out there in our community. They're great. They let me know when I need to slow things down. So, probably on the more expensive side of all the different quick build solutions we've offered here, but an important one to mention and that other cities are using. None of this stuff comes without trade-offs, right? What are the big ones? I think elephant in the room probably is snow removal. These will definitely make it harder to, be the best city out there in Minnesota, like we pretty much are at snow removal. So kudos, like we're at the top we get rated top in quality of life survey and whatnot for snow removal. Could we balance that? Do we need to be the top city at snow removal? And can we balance that with putting some of these other quick build solutions in place that, what good is a perfectly plowed street if it's not a good street, a safe street for seniors or young kids to walk across, right? I think that's the macro point there. And then cost, so that would come up as a potential trade-off, but again, there are a lot of different grant programs to apply to, and a lot of these quick build solutions can be relatively cheap on the cost side of things. So, back to the game. First item was, I live in Southwest Edina, near the Braemar Golf Course. Was that a truth or a lie? Truth, you got it. There you go. And I have young kids who play in the community out on the streets. Also a truth. And then, officer, close your ears. I never exceed the speed limit? I'll say it's a lie. But you know what? The reason why we're here is to help people make good decisions. I need help as a driver making good decisions. I need to continue to be reminded about the speed limit. I need quick build solutions in my way to make sure that I'm recognizing I need to slow down. I think all of us in the community are really looking for help to slow things down out there. So please, direct staff, on behalf of the commission, I want to convey to continue to invest in the Drive 25 campaign and community engagement there, pilot quick build solutions, and review these additional grant programs we've outlined in the report for implementation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Scipione.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Excellent presentation.
So the traffic safety improvements the city implements in a number of different ways. The three listed on the screen here are the primary ways that we implement traffic calming improvements as part of capital improvement projects. So this is roadway reconstructions or projects that are funded by the PACS fund. Some of these come as a result from traffic safety requests that are submitted to staff from residents or members of the community. And some of these improvements are implemented as a result of petitions that are submitted to City Council. Implementation of traffic calming strategies are currently guided by the manual and uniform traffic control devices, by our own local traffic management policies, and by city staff's technical knowledge and judgment. Traffic safety improvements in general support goals within our comprehensive plan, within our Living Streets plan, and our climate action plan. As Grant mentioned, the city has used a number of traffic calming strategies in the past, but with varying degrees of regularity. You can see here some of the strategies used in Edina include curb extensions in the South Cornelia neighborhood, traffic circles that we have in Creek Knoll neighborhood, and refuge islands, which you can see an example here in the Southdale neighborhood. Other strategies like delineators and speed bumps, we often get requests for these and have discussion about these, but we've never practiced using them on a permanent basis. Snow plowing impact has primarily been the rationale for that. However, adjacent cities like Richfield and Minneapolis, you can see here, Ridgefield has used delineators on 69th Street as part of an on-street pedestrian facility. And this picture obviously was taken during the winter. And then in the city of Minneapolis, you have an example here of a permanent speed bump on Irving Avenue. Our transportation division has an initiative on its work plan right now to review existing local traffic management policies for consistency with industry best practices and city goals. What staff is recommending kind of to support the Transportation Commission's work is that we amend that initiative to include an analysis of these traffic calming strategies and to develop a guide that would support the city in consistent implementation of these approved strategies. Staff recommends that that work then be reviewed by the Transportation Commission and by our Traffic Safety Committee before it is presented to City Council. And with that, we'll stand for any questions.
So you're looking for a motion from us to have you amend your work plan?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Yeah, let me turn to my colleagues here and see if somebody has a question or a comment. Member Pierce, yeah, lead us off, please.
Thank you. Nice presentation. I definitely appreciated that. So I have maybe two questions. In terms of the calming, the quick builds, are those things that, and I think you gave an example of this, those are things that we could set up and use those, say, during the summer months, and then take those things down in preparation for winter? Like something like the circle that seemed like rubber to me and a makeshift sign kind of thing.
Correct. So an example, I'll turn to this slide from Grant's presentation. So this is an example of a temporary curb extension in a neighborhood. On the left, or on one side, you can see the delineators used. On the other side, you just see pavement markings. We did actually conduct a trial like this in the South Cornelia neighborhood at the intersection of 72nd and Cornelia Drive. That's the top image here. After following that demonstration project, we did end up installing permanent curb extensions. So that's an example where we piloted a demonstration project and then used it to inform a permanent improvement.
And where I was going with that is we get lots of emails when people are asking us to test traffic to see if people are speeding through their neighborhoods or not stopping at the stop signs. And then process-wise, we will go study that and then we'll make a recommendation. And so the question from a process standpoint, if we thought any of these quick builds could be something that we could do for a period of time, is that part of our process to where we might say, all right, let's put the traffic circle up to slow traffic down on this particular street in this neighborhood and leave it there, for the 4 months of the summer and then pull it back out for winter? Is that part of the way we might consider thinking about those?
We could. We don't have like a formal process. I just brought two back from a conference. City of Rochester and City of Minneapolis have more of a formal process to do these tests. We've done them once in a while when they seem to make sense or there's a grant associated with it. I think what Andrew's suggesting is let's look at all those processes and see if we make it more formal in that regard. And then one other caveat is some of our streets, the municipal state aid streets, we can't do some of this. So there's still regulations that there's certain streets that we can't do some of this because of the jurisdiction. So
it just seems like we might be able to be a little bit more or even more resident focus if we're able to say, yeah, we can put a speed bump out there, but we can only do it for this period of time for safety reasons. Correct. And then we have to remove it for snow. And so looking at that as a kind of a process, augmenting a process or a process change there, I think would make a lot of sense. And then the other thing is awareness. Like, that's huge. I was talking to a police officer, and she said when they're doing traffic speed checks, that people will be flying by and it's 25 mile an hour zone. And then when she pulls them over, they don't realize, oh, I thought it was still 40, or I thought it was 30. And so I think, to your point, I think the awareness piece is really huge, even for me, just to remember, yeah, this, if I don't see another stop sign, another speed limit posted, then it's 25, right? And so I think we could definitely do that even more. So I appreciate you looking into this, because we do get a lot of requests from neighborhoods on trying to improve traffic patterns within the neighborhoods. So thank you.
Member Agnew.
Thank you. And Commissioner Wright, thank you for an amazing presentation. I was reminded that you work in communications. That was really good. Thank you. Also, as we were going through this is more anecdotal, but you said speed humps. And I always thought that like speed humps was one of the like bubbler versus like drinking fountain kind of things, but they're actually different. Like a speed hump, I Googled this, is like around 10 to 12 feet long, and then a speed bump is like the quick one. So thank you. I learned during your presentation. I'm definitely supportive of this. I like looking into it. I remember actually when I was out door knocking, what stood out to me is I'd gotten some complaints about the 25-mile-an-hour speed because people felt like they weren't able to get to where they wanted to go as quickly. But I love it. And I love continuing to share the word about it. My car has one of those features where it like reads the speed markers, and it like tells me on my dash, which I love because otherwise I would forget as well. But thank you for the continued kind of focus and coming back with a pivot, and I definitely support it. So thank you.
Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you, Commissioner. This was, I concur with my peers that this was a great presentation. Two things I would be interested in finding out as you work on this is whether some of these changes could be seasonal. So I know with the snow plows, if the speed humps could be put in and taken out. But then the second part of that is how much staff time would it take to do something like that, and what would the ongoing cost be? But I'm really interested. I love the fact that a lot of the pictures you had were summer pictures, and I think when we can take the snow plow out of the equation, that might be able to get us safety when more kids would be out on their bikes, for instance. And so seasonality and staff time to implement are the two things I'd like to hear from you. Thank you.
Member Urser.
Thank you for your presentation. And one way to calm traffic is by street murals. And so they're flat, and you've got all these brightly colored areas. And I know there's at least one in Minneapolis. And so that was one thing I didn't see, but I thought that might be a possibility because it wouldn't interfere with the plows. The other thing is, I really do appreciate the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. And true story, summer day, I was going down Wooddale. A kid on rollerblades came out right in front of my car, and there was a tennis ball he was going after with a hockey stick. And it was just like out of one of those movies. And if I had been going faster, I don't know, I mean, it would have been horrible. So it really is important. And I think, but for that speed limit, which I was following, who knows what the outcome of that would have been. So I think your work is really important. I appreciate it, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. Commissioner Jackson Member Jackson recalls something else
Right.
there.
Yes, thank you. If you can start with 49th Street in White Oaks, that would be a great place to start because they're desperate for being able to walk safely in the neighborhood. There are no sidewalks on 49th Street. So that's my plug for 49th Street.
We had last week at the TAB a presentation by Ethan Foley from Minneapolis, City Minneapolis, who's in charge of their Vision Zero work that they're doing. And so you had the City Minneapolis logo on the screen. I assume that you've been visiting with him.
It was 6 months ago. I can't remember his name, honestly, but
Yeah.
it could be.
I think he'd
somebody
be-
in a
he's
similar department that you connected me with.
Yeah, he's a guy you want to talk to. would be more than happy to assist you as, I'm assuming the council is going to approve this modification of your work plan. But he would be a wonderful resource for you. He used to be on the tab as a non-motorized rep. And now he sits, with full-time employment over at City Minneapolis as their non-motorized person and has worked on his Vision Zero strategy over there. So, and to the point you were making, Commissioner, about grants, we're a little over halfway through that IIJA funding now, and so I'm sure there's still, and the US DOT has a strong emphasis around Vision Zero and trying to reduce traffic deaths, which have gone down nationally. And this calming is a critical part of that, so I commend you for that work. And then just a little nit for you. I had a resident call me and say, this isn't, I'm not picking on you or the city, but when I get off the crosstown at Valley View, just west of the hospital, I turn right on Valley View, and I'm not going to get this exactly right, but it says 25. He goes down a little further, it says 30. He goes down a little further, it says 25, and then he goes down a little further, it says 30. So there's some inconsistency on the signage over there. Maybe somebody could look at it on Valley View as you move towards France Avenue, kind of behind where my office is at 6800 France. Take a look at that.
Yeah, certainly. There are
it.
some places in the city where we have what we call gateway signs that as soon as you enter the city tell you speed limit is 25 unless posted otherwise. But then sometimes you're entering on a street that is actually 30. So in those cases, sometimes you do have those two signs that kind of convey two separate, but
Yeah, well,
it
he
can
may
be
not be
confusing
reading
messages.
all the information on the first sign. Okay. So is there a motion to amend the work plan for the Edina Transportation Commission to permit the calming work that they want to do?
So moved. Second.
Sorry, the change is actually to the Transportation Division's work plan, not the Transportation Commission.
Division work plan?
Yes.
Okay. All right, you even wanted us to approve that. All right, I thought that you get enough direction from the commission itself. All right, we have a understanding the change in the motion that it's staff directed, not commission directed. So moved. We had a second from.
Second.
Second from Member Jackson. Member Pierce is the mover. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as requested, as recommended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. The recommended motion is approved. Thank you for being here, both of you. All right. Now we're going to go to a sketch plan review on 5100 Eden Avenue, and Addison Lewis, our community development coordinator, has this matter, and this is a address affectionately known as the building on stilts over by the hilltop.
All right.
Mr. Lewis, welcome, and thank you. Look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So the Opus Group has submitted a sketch plan proposal at 5100 Eden Avenue. And just for those in the audience or watching from home, a sketch plan proposal is not a formal development application. It's an opportunity for a landowner or a developer to propose an idea for a project and receive non-binding feedback from the Planning Commission and City Council. No action is taken on a sketch plan, so the purpose of tonight is really just to have a discussion that might inform a future development application. As I said, the subject property is 5100 Eden Avenue. You may recall that this property received preliminary PUD approval in 2023 for a 7-story, 136-unit apartment building. The new proposal is to construct a 5-story, 112,000 square foot office building that would potentially include commercial and or a retail user on the ground floor. Opus has also indicated that they would relocate their headquarters from Minnetonka to this site and occupy a portion of the office building. The proposal would involve demolition of the existing office building that was constructed in 1968. That building is approximately 38,000 square feet, so it's about 1/3 of the size of the proposed building. These are just some photos of the site as it is today from the Arcadia Avenue side. This is another look from the Eden Avenue side. And the current zoning on the property is Planned Office District 1. The applicants have proposed a rezoning to Plan Commercial District 2 that would allow for the ground floor commercial or retail user that wouldn't be allowed under the planned office district. You can see that a lot of the surrounding property in the Grandview District is already zoned Plan Commercial District 2. The site is guided mixed-use center on the future land use map of the comprehensive plan. These are mixed-use districts that are intended to serve areas larger than just the surrounding neighborhood. 50th and France and the Grandview District are the only two areas in our comprehensive plan that have this designation, and they're really envisioned to be about a 50-50 split between residential and commercial uses. And in 2012, the city completed the Grandview District Development Framework, and in terms of land use, that plan states that the plan emphasizes a mixed-use sub-area between Vernon, Eden, Highway 100, and the rail corridor. That's kind of that orange area that you see on the screen that's identified as mixed-use center. The plan goes on to say that Arcadia is seen as a more residential street with a range of condo, apartments, and multi-level townhouse types. Mixed use and office buildings are anticipated and may be oriented to Vernon and or south towards Eden and Our Lady of Grace Fields. So here's just another rendering of what's depicted or envisioned for the site. You can see it's kind of 2 to 3 story townhouses along Arcadia with taller multifamily or office buildings located or oriented closer to the highway and Eden Avenue. In 2016, the city also completed the Grandview District Transportation Study. That plan envisioned a new frontage road along the east side of this property. It's not likely that that would happen anytime soon, but it's just something that could happen in the future and that you should be aware of. So here is a rendering of what's being proposed. Again, it's a 5-story office building, approximately 112,000 square feet. Here's a look at their site plan showing the ground floor uses. So you can see they're showing some type of active commercial use on the corner, but it's yet to be determined exactly what that would be. You see there is an outdoor terrace on the south side of the building for that user that looks over the corner pocket park. There would be 2 vehicular accesses, just as there is today, one off of Arcadia, one off of Eden Avenue. This is just another site plan that shows the setbacks for the proposed building. So the building on the west side, on the Arcadia Avenue side, would be about 20 feet setback. On the north side, about 6 feet, about 15.5 feet on the east side. And then along the Eden Ave side, at its closest point, you see that corner there is about 3 feet. I want to note here too that along the Eden Ave side, we have about 30 feet from the property line to the street. On the Arcadia side, there's only about 5 feet from the property line to the street. In fact, we only have about 40 feet of right-of-way there from this property line to our property line on the public works site. It's about 40 feet wide. So just something to keep in mind as you think about the building massing, orientation on the site. There would be 2 below-grade parking decks. They're showing a total of about 300 parking stalls, which should be enough based on the size of the proposed building. The applicants have indicated that they intend to comply with the city's parking ordinance, but there would also be an update to the traffic and parking study as part of a formal application. This is a look at just some of the upper level floor plans. So on the left is the second level. You see there would be an amenity area and then an outdoor kind of rooftop terrace there over the top of the first level. And then the 4th and 5th level floor plans there. This request would likely involve rezoning from Planned Office District 1 to Planned Commercial District 2 or a PUD. It would require variances or flexibility through a PUD from likely from building height, floor area ratio, and building and parking setbacks. It would also require a replat to consolidate the 7 parcels into one, as well as site plan review. And then once we got a formal application with more detailed plans, it's possible that there would be other requests as well. Just a reminder here of our pyramid of discretion. So with a rezoning, the city is operating in a legislative capacity, so the city has complete discretion. With variances, the city is acting in a quasi-judicial fashion, so still have some discretion, but less so than with a rezoning. This is just the compliance table that was included in the staff report, so it just kind of shows how the proposed project compares to the standards of the current zoning of Planned Office District 1, the proposed zoning of Planned Commercial District 2, as well as the PUD that was approved in 2023 for the 136-unit apartment building. And you can see there the items in bold are for the things that where flexibility would be requested, so with the setbacks, the building height, and floor area ratio. And then for other things, as I said, like the first floor building height, building materials, first floor transparency, those are kind of TBD until we get more detailed plans. This slide is just included to kind of give you some context of other developments in the Grandview area that have either been approved or are existing today that have are the same height or more, or same floor area ratio or more as the proposed project. And then I wanted to note here too that the property is located within a quarter mile of Metro Transit Bus Route 46, which does have 7-day-a-week service and provides connections to other important transit routes throughout the region, including the future E-Line BRT, the Orange Line BRT, D-Line BRT, and the Blue Line LRT. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. Otherwise, the development team is here to say a few words tonight as well.
Sure. Let me check with my colleagues here and see if anybody has any additional questions for you at this point in time. I think Member Jackson wants to ask you a question or has a comment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if you could go back to the chart about the different zoning classifications. It looks like if this were to be zoned PCD 2, it would need quite a few variances. Is that correct?
That is correct, yep.
Okay. Yeah, that was my question. Thank you.
Other question, yeah, Member Agnew.
Thank you. So this might be for you or might be for Director Teague, but I understand that this is a replacement for the project that we had initially looked at, I think it said in 2023 for the same site. But would you be able to also provide just kind of a status on the property to the north as well as the property to the west on current happenings, just to kind of like ground us in the overall development of this area?
So the property to the west, referring to the public works site. Yep. So I know you all are discussing that as an HRA of what to do that with that. We had a project that actually here I had shown on here. In the middle on the top there was the 86-unit senior co-op with restaurant and public park. So it's kind of to be determined, I guess, what it's going to be. It's zoned industrial, but I don't think it's going to end up being industrial in the long term. As far as the property to the north, that's the Hilltop restaurant. There's other kind of commercial businesses north of there and to the west. I don't know that we've gotten any other development interest kind of to the north. So not sure what the future holds for those properties.
Okay, thank you. Anything to add, Director Teague?
No, just to reiterate again, we haven't received any development interests in those properties to the north.
Okay, thank you. My other questions will be for the applicant, so that concludes that. Thank you.
Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The other question I had was in the transportation plan, would this layout preclude that street parallel to Highway 100, or would there still be room for that?
There'd still be room for it.
Oh, okay,
Yep,
great.
we talked about that earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Would you go back to that compliance table, please? I think Member Jackson started down an interesting pathway here. Is it a staff preference on PCD2 as opposed to PUD, or is it a developer preference?
The applicants have proposed rezoning to PCD2. Ultimately, it's up to them what they request. If we go that route and variances are needed, you know, as I said, with our pyramid of discretion, when we're looking at those variances, we have less discretion. We have to apply that statutory criteria. So those variances would have to meet that justification. The city has alternatively used the PUD process, where you have a bit more discretion to approve projects that you feel meet the goals of the comprehensive plan. So that's where I thought you all could give a little feedback. I know there's maybe some differing opinions on using PUD versus rezoning to PCD and using variances, but that's just something to think about, is that, it'll ultimately be up to the applicant to demonstrate that those variances meet that criteria for a variance.
Okay, all right. I think just stand by from a staff standpoint. Your presentation was thorough. And then you've told the applicants they've got 10 minutes or so, I think, to make their presentation, and we've got several of them here that have been patiently waiting. Mr. Mernan and Mr. Loken.
Yes, good afternoon.
I'll let you, Mr. Mernan, identify who's with you here.
Yes, I will. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Nick Mernan with Opus Development. It's great to see you all again on a site that we're all very familiar with. I'm joined by Matthew Axman and Bob Loken from ESG Architects. As you heard in the presentation, a site that you're all familiar with. We went through the process on the multifamily market rate apartment project, and we're very excited tonight to be looking at a different use on the site, looking at a multi-tenant spec office building. We are here to solicit all your feedback, hear your comments, and answer any questions you have. I was going to turn it over to Matt and Bob to just give a little more information in addition to the presentation that you already heard. So I'll let them take it away.
You've got a slide deck too that you want to use?
I think we're using the same slide deck, so we'll probably jump to our image. Oh, I missed that.
Okay.
I sure did. Sorry, and then we'll jump.
Well, I'll start while they're figuring that out. So, good evening, Mayor and council members. The staff report was thorough. We don't have much to add. I'm just going to briefly talk about why we're excited about this new use as opposed to residential. We think this site is uniquely suited to office development. Its adjacency to Highway 100 makes it slightly less suited to housing. The noise and the air quality issues that come with being located to highways affect less an office use where windows are typically not operable. Secondly, an office use can benefit from high visibility from Highway 100, and given the recent residential development in this area and what we probably all anticipate will be more residential development in the future, we think balancing that with an office use which puts 300 or so occupants, daytime users in the area who can also be patronizers of the local businesses, we think it's just going to make this a much more vibrant mixed-use node in the future. And I'm going to turn it over to Matt, who's going to highlight just a couple of design features that we'd like to talk about, and he's also going to, I think, maybe work in some of the anecdotal feedback that we heard from the Planning Commission last week.
All right, thank you. Mr. Loken.
Yes, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Council. Yeah, I'm just going to really quickly talk about a couple of things if you hadn't had a chance to listen in on the Planning Commission, but kind of starting off just general building orientation and massing. We did an east-west orientation, knowing that that's the best general kind of placement related to sustainability, so that was kind of the key factor. The other thing that we've been planning for and have learned a little bit with the commission is that really active use along Arcadia is going to be really important. So things that we're kind of adjusting in real time, and we're really excited eventually to show you some beautiful pictures of is really what we're going to be doing along what is A, C, and E, as noted on this master plan, to really create porosity and activity along that sidewalk. Creating multiple entry zones, creating outdoor spaces for respite for not only the people of the building but for pedestrians and passerbys, and then really looking at the pocket park at B as an opportunity to create a really nice buffer between what is a relatively active street with cars kind of zipping through that roundabout. We could use those traffic slowing measures maybe a little bit more here, but and then really once we create that buffer, creating more public space for the community, and then engaging that with the architecture in a unique way. Thank you.
I think with that, we're open to feedback, questions, comments.
All right, folks have questions? here at this point in time? Yeah, Member Pierce, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So on the north side, there we go.
Yeah, that's good, that's helpful.
So the conversation about the frontage road, can you just give some context to what you think might happen with that? Because before we had talked about making some changes there.
Sure, and maybe Director Milner can speak to this better than I can, but, so right now, there is a frontage road there along the north side of the building, that's kind of the, I don't know, the off-ramp, the extended off-ramp that gets you access onto Arcadia Avenue if you were coming from Highway 100 southbound. And then, so this Grandview District Transportation Study envisioned that going away and sort of this new frontage road that would be more like a local street going in along the east side. And then you can kind of see here too that there would still be a road connecting that frontage road with Arcadia Avenue.
Okay, and you said that's unlikely to happen anytime soon. I think that might have been an actual quote.
Yeah, that new frontage road along the east side.
Okay.
Just based on my discussion with
On the
Director
east
Milner,
side,
sounds like
okay.
it's unlikely to happen for a while.
It's a long-term vision for the district, and Eden Avenue Bridge would have to most likely be replaced to make that happen. So it's another big infrastructure replacement that's part of those long-term vision. But this would still be allowed per their sketch plan.
Okay, oh, that's good. And then activation, if go back to maybe the,
Depends what you're looking for.
oh, there you go back. That one? Yeah, that one. And so you talked about the pocket park on B. And so if we're on Arcadia, describe what you're thinking about activation, because that is something that actually we were excited about with the other proposal, kind of thinking about what our vision was for the public works site and how those two sites might complement each other.
Sure, I can start and Matt can add anything. We're very excited about this. You know, the experience today as you come either down Eden or down Arcadia is a 5, 6, almost 6 foot retaining wall. It's not very pedestrian friendly. One of the planning commission members even said you almost feel trapped between the cars and the retaining wall with the roundabout and everyone kind of zipping by. So what we're looking at is how can we have this pocket park be at, you know, we have a lot of grade change from A down to E is about 16, 17, 18 feet. So how can we have this pocket park be at a grade that is at the same grade as the sidewalk so that really it's this larger area that extends? And what we're exploring and looking at is, you know, possibly even looking, and I think you guys can see my cursor, but, you know, possibly even bringing the sidewalk inboard a bit. How can we have a sidewalk that isn't right up against that roundabout so that when you're walking out at the experience isn't cars going by, you know, 1 or 2 feet away. We've got the space there that we could meander it through, maintain those 10-foot sidewalks. And then the actual programming of the space, I think, similar to our housing proposal, we're excited to continue to talk to all of you and see how we can program that in a way that is inviting to the public. It's an open green space, but it's also a path where people are traveling through to create a much safer environment as you come down Eden or down Arcadia.
And so down Arcadia, where you've got office commercial, are you thinking of, so activation A through E, I guess. What are you just thinking C to E, just retail?
Really, it's activating, you know, that's really our primary public realm facing facade is that Arcadia facade. And really it's activating, this is a very preliminary site plan that we've done a lot of work on already that we're excited to share. You know, this space here is, call it 15 or 16 feet above the grade or, you know, the elevation of the roundabout. So how do we activate that in a way that really, you know, works from all the way from the north side up on Arcadia all the way down. So I think Bob or Matt had mentioned different access points along this landscape terrace on the side. So this doesn't do a great job, and obviously we'll have better images in our official submittal, but how do we landscape this in a way that the sidewalk comes down the hill, but we also have these terraced landscapes that provide access up and into the retail to the office and really create a connection between the building and the streetscape.
Okay. And then the only other, I guess, comment, when you look at the number of variances that you might need, I actually, when I went through this, I actually like the idea, but I am kind of putting it in the context of there's an office building there now that I probably look at 3 times a day driving through there. But what I want to make sure I'm not doing is comparing the number of variances you might need to the fact that that building needs to be redone, and kind of letting that factor into how lenient I might be on approving a variance. And so that's the one thing that gives me pause, I guess, thinking about all the variances that might need to be approved for this. I don't really have a question in that, but just to give you that feedback.
Yes, very helpful. We are open to the discussion. PCD felt like the right direction. We did hear from the Planning Commission that was the direction they preferred. I won't speak for all of the Planning Commission members, but we did hear that from a handful of them. We recognize there are a handful of variances. The zoning, I know there's conversations about zoning in general and how that's being looked at. The current zoning, if you were to follow that without any variances, you'd be left with a very, very small, unfunctional building that we simply wouldn't be able to move forward with.
Thank you.
Member Agnew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we could go back to kind of the overall visual, I want to understand where is the entrance for pedestrians?
Yes, so this is something we are, again, very excited to share our new images with, which we have. The main drop-off is occurring here for vehicles, but we are looking at a very significant celebrated pedestrian entrance kind of right here. So it doesn't show it well here. This is, again, an old site plan. And if I jump to the 3D image, you can imagine, and I know it's killing these guys that we don't have architecture here to share. It's very blocky, and it's not showing, it's really just a straight wall. It won't be that. So you would have a vehicular entrance here, and then there would be a celebrated, entry to the building, which is, of course, important for a multi-tenant office building. So that would occur somewhere in this area. Again, we have some grade challenges, but the idea is, we would have multiple access points. There's likely to be an arcade similar to what you see here that probably runs the full length of Arcadia, so that there's a walkway that would be elevated with multiple access points that is not shown here. So, you wouldn't be able to just come in here with stairs. Obviously, you need to be ADA compliant, things like that. So we're looking at how do we have this kind of full arcade along, again, Arcadia, that has multiple access points.
Okay, thank you. The visual is killing me too, so I'm with you on that. What are you thinking about for the office commercial site?
Yeah, we would love to see a restaurant user if the market is there for that. We want to keep the ultimate flexibility of commercial space, if you will. So, I call it could be a bank, it could be a retail store, it could be a restaurant. Just keeping that flexibility to see what the market really shows us.
What would this allow for if it were a restaurant from a seating capacity? Because I would assume you'd have to cut out a fair amount of that for kitchen and everything.
Yeah, that's a good question that I may need to follow up on. I mean, you'd probably, I think in our latest plan, call it a 6,500 square foot restaurant would be the largest that you could be. I don't know.
6,500 square feet for both combined dining room and kitchen is a significant restaurant. It's very large.
I don't know the seating capacity. We can follow up with that.
Okay, that would be helpful, thank you. So I think for me, and I might have more feedback after, I don't know if I have a direct question, but when I'm looking at the compliance table, and this visual here, kind of going back and forth between the two, and there's so many pages apart, so I'm scrolling, but it's a lot of setback variance. And so that immediately jumps out to me, and partially it could be because of the visual that we're looking at, where it's a straight wall, and it feels like it's right there. That to me is concerning. So what I want to see is aligning to the PCD2 setback variances or setback requirements that are listed here in the table. And with that, I would personally have more appetite for height to still give you the number of, the amount of office space that you need. But I don't want it to feel so imposing. So that's request number one. And then just generally looking at this, it feels like you're substantially overparked. So I'd want to, before we were to pursue any further on that part of it, I'd want to understand a little bit more about the data that, because this is your company, right?
Multiple companies. So we will occupy about 30% of the space. I would say that market standard for suburban office is probably close to 4 per thousand, and we're at about 3 per thousand. So we actually feel we're underparked for the office need that we'll have here. Recognize that we're going more and more away from everybody driving to work, but consistently across a lot of what we've seen, 3 per thousand would be the absolute minimum that we could get comfortable with.
So I would be curious to see the statistics for your headquarters in Minnetonka. Give me, data points as best as you can collect it over the last, as far back as you can do it. Because even though you're just 30% is probably the largest that would be in there, or are you thinking there would be another larger?
Yeah, there could be another larger tenant. We would occupy, call it roughly 30,000 feet, and on our count, we have, call it 105 employees, and we typically average anywhere from 90 to 90-ish cars per day, and then we obviously have guest parking on top of that. So we have verified for our use, we would need 3 per thousand. And consistently, as we've worked on in other markets and have already received unsolicited feedback from tenants that would be interested, all of them have said they would require 3 per thousand for parking. And that needs to be on site. So we did explore, there is a city ramp, is there an opportunity there? It's unfortunately just not quite close enough.
Is that because of financing, or because that's like the actual utilization of parking that they're seeing?
Utilization and market demand. Financing may require it as well, but that's separate from this with what I was saying, that this is market demand of what tenants require.
I'd be happy to have a further conversation about that at some point, but we don't need to do that here. Okay, I think that's it for now.
Good. Thank you for now. Member Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have specific things and a big thing. I'm trying to decide. I'm going to just feed off of what Member Agnew said. I would love to see this narrower and taller. This setback, and I don't know how this compares to the Avador along Arcadia, seems really, really close. And I understand that this is a good site for commercial and not for residential, but the hope of having this be mixed use, it's kind of sad that it won't be residential in any respect. I'll just say that the dream for this area was to have a lot of sort of mixed use with the hopes that these buildings could be built as mixed use. But tell me, so there are two things. One is narrower and taller, and then also a setback from the first story. And because it just feels like really big building where, what we were thinking of were townhomes. Dramatically different from that kind of neighborhood feel, makes it feel much more urban, but not in a mixed-use urban sort of way.
Sure, very helpful feedback. We did hear a little of that from Planning Commission as well, and we are looking at how the building steps and possibly Feedback we heard from Planning Commission was actually that they would prefer that we push the building east and get to even, I don't remember the number they said, but have an even closer, have a variance for an even closer lot line, or 0 lot line even, I believe is what we heard. So we are exploring that option as well, on the east, I'm sorry, on the east side, to step back off Arcadia. Understand the feedback on taller and skinnier. Office plates have to be efficient, and it's really hard to go skinny and tall. A lot of these groups have specific needs, and we're trying to get as narrow and as small as we can. It's really hard to build an office building with a plate smaller than 25,000 feet. 24 is about where we're at. We will definitely take that feedback and try to skinny it up as much as we can. Candidly, it's going to be very hard for us to adhere to the setbacks of PCD2.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, a large portion of the office buildings that are suffering low occupancy in downtown business districts are older buildings with smaller floor plates.
Okay.
So,
And I just have a quick kind of design element related to the kind of perception of height. So one of the things that we're studying right now, and again, what we're excited to show you, is we're looking at sort of this, what we're calling the dock, or this like element that kind of comes out. We're actually thinking from a design kind of motif and story, is that actually is kind of cut into the building itself, so that only, if we go back to the floor plan, our idea is that really only that gray section you're kind of seeing at the top here. Can you see this where my cursor is? That's the portion of aesthetically that actually touches the ground, and the rest is sort of this dock element kind of penetrating through at a much smaller single-story scale. So that was, again, one of the comments that we heard from the commission, and we're starting to study that, and we're really excited about that C element kind of being what you as a pedestrian are perceiving versus the 5-story building.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. And then when you were talking about having an arcade running along Arcadia, for another building that I saw a presentation on in another context, they were talking about having a glass hallway. And if you could see the people coming back and forth, it would have that more intimacy than a brick wall, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That entire Arcadia facade behind the arcade is likely going to be nearly 100% glass. So.
Okay, great. So then my big picture question is, if this is going to be Opus's corporate headquarters, what is the message that you want to say as a developer in this building? So I'm driving by, I see the Opus sign. What am I going to think about Opus when I see the building? Or go inside it?
Sure, yeah, good question. Well, we had a design charrette, if you will, last week that was very exciting. It was a lot of fun to think about what this skin could look like. Again, nobody was excited about this. This is blocking diagrams. So we recognize this is our corporate headquarters. This is an important building for us. It's an important building for Edina. Opus has a ton of history in the Grandview neighborhood. We're really excited to make this building pop and really jump off the page. And I said jewel box last week, and I was careful saying that, but I really think that is what this is. This is a great opportunity to be a gateway to the district and have a really unique, cool building that we're really excited about. It's a site that, again, we were fully approved for apartments and just couldn't move forward and just couldn't get away from it. As Councilmember Pierce said, drive by it 4 or 5 times a day, and I think it just was ingrained in my head, like, we have to do something, and we like it so much that we want to move our headquarters here. So we're really excited about it. We're really excited to get these design images pulled together so that we can start to share those and get even more feedback on what the skin looks like, because we recognize this is just a blocking diagram.
Okay, right. And I do like the nod to the building on stilts on the Highway 100 side. That's really, that jumps out as a lovely memorial. So that's cool. So yeah, I think that if you can engineer the feeling as you walk along Acadia that it's not, that it has a sense of human scale, that's really important. For me, it's sketch plan. It's all about what's it like moving around the space. So, you've talked about the plaza in the south, and it feels like this will move around pretty nicely. I'm sure you've talked with Mr. Milner about that, but that on-ramp to Highway 100 will be going away. And so just kind of thinking about the traffic flow and how that would impact. But yeah, it's exciting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Risser.
If we could go back to the image that you have that shows, yeah. I did watch the Planning Commission, and I do want to say, I like the fact that this is office and commercial. And I know this is the mixed-use area, but we have had so many purely residential buildings go in that I think this provides balance that is really very much needed. I like the idea of you talking about it as a ship. And I also really appreciate the complexity of this particular site because it does dip down. And I do walk along the sidewalk. It does feel very intimidating with that massive stone wall. And I do look forward to seeing the next phase where you show us the arcade. And I like the play of arcade, an arcade along Arcadia. That's sweet. And, I think Member Jackson mentioned the reference to the building that is there right now, the building on stilts. And, as someone who used to be an architectural historian, I feel like you're ticking all the boxes and you're really creating something that is going to be functional, but also a showcase for your business. And so I am really very excited by it. I do really appreciate how you've got this single story jutting out. And I think that does really create a greater sense of it being human scale. And it'll contrast so magnificently with what is there right now. If we could go back to the table with the variances, and yeah, you're going to have to get variances for this. And I think what would be helpful is to show the present building and what the setbacks are right now. Because I do think it probably is non-compliant with, and you're nodding, and I think that is true. I like the fact that you're going for PCD2. I do think we overuse PUD, and well, you could say if you go for PUD, all of these variance requests will be built in, but there's got to be a give to get, and I think that's going to be kind of a challenge. The other thing is, the way we do PUD here, we bake the actual site plan into the zoning, creating a proprietary zoning. And so when we talk about that pyramid of discretion, we can't just talk about the green level and the yellow level. We got to go all the way to the top, to the red. And I get very concerned when we're mixing all of the colors and voting on them in one fell swoop. And then we're committed to a specific site plan. So there's a lot that I really do appreciate. And then if we could go back to the overall view where we see the street, yeah, or that one there. And this, I really do appreciate where you're putting the entrances, the fact that you're doing the trash where you are. It's off of Eden. That just makes so much more sense. I do think you have to have, just the way it's functioning, you have to have two entrances. It would be wonderful if we figured out this frontage road and there was a way for you to come in and then have the entrance off of the frontage road, but that's not going to happen, the one to the north. So I think, given the complexity of the space, you are really presenting something that is very much suited to the site. I like the wider sidewalks. I think that'll work really well. So I don't really, I appreciate the fact that the market is driving the number of parking spaces. So I really don't have any kind of huge suggestion to make. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments.
You could just, you could leave it on this site plan slide for now. Over the years, when people have asked me what do I think would be the best use of this site at 5100, I've always said either corporate headquarters or medical office. So I joined Member Risser in saying that I think it's really, when I heard you were thinking about it as your corporate headquarters and moving from Minnetonka and coming into the town where the family lived, and still family members live, it's pretty exciting. So as your partners, we want to get it right, and we get to work on this together. And I joined my colleagues, I guess, in saying the only point I really worry about from that proximity to the building and the sidewalk and is where you cross the drive aisle in that northwest corner where you've got like 3 to 5 feet of setback. So I would join other folks, even the planning commission, say, to me, shove it as far east as you can. And I understand your floor plate argument in terms of you designed it at 5 feet for a purpose. If you thought it would have been better for you to go taller, I think you would have realized that you probably had that flexibility because we talked about that on the last project.
We did, yeah.
You remember that? And you convinced me that otherwise, because that was my first preference there too. If you go then to the blocking photo, the blocking elevation, understand that it's blocking, and I know that you working with ESG will come up with a beautiful design because it's just going to be your corporate home, and you want to be proud of it, and you want people in the town to be proud of it, and it's going to be a wonderful addition to the community. So I would say just make sure that you don't get too linear on that Arcadia Avenue side, that you've got things moving in and out. And maybe even think about this with some of the Southdale design guidelines. I think it's at 65 feet, people still feel like it's not a sheer wall. So if you could even give some thought to podium, at the 65-foot mark, move the plates a little bit further east. So even if they cantilevered over the plates that were below, it might be a thought of making people feel like the building isn't right on top of them. If you understand what I'm saying there. And I think if you look at those design experience guidelines for the Southdale district, you'll find that as a recommendation at 65 feet is my recollection.
I think another element that we're studying as a way to make that not feel as austere potentially is that maybe we introduce all of our like exterior balconies or terrace levels for the office portion along Arcadia as well on that elevation to create, again, more reprieve, more push and pull in the building, and then create more activity along Arcadia as well.
And then go back to the other site plan. I wanted to ask you, so you talked about a main pedestrian entrance on Arcadia. I thought that was a great idea. So then I'm coming in either from the south or the north, and I'm going to turn in and drop somebody at the covered entrance is really what it is. And then where am I going next? Am I going in that drive aisle where it says 26 feet? Or where am I going?
You could make your way kind of southbound and down out
that way.
Otherwise, you could do a loop. If you went down the 26, then do a donut and back out on Arcadia if you wanted.
So you're going to have some flexibility on the drive aisles in there then, on getting out.
Yeah, it's all two-way traffic on those. They're wide enough to...
Or getting in. I guess you could come in off Eden and go up to the north and come across and drop them across away from the drop-off or the main entrance. That's covered. Okay.
And generally with office users, once they've been there a couple times and they know where their spot is they're going to find the path of least resistance based on their commute.
Agreed.
They're going to know what side they come in, and they're never going to change.
Yeah, some interesting traffic movements in there internally. So that's about all I've got. I think the idea of lowering that south corner, getting rid of that wall and trying to bring it down to grade a little bit is a nice idea to match it up better with the roundabout and maybe pulling that sidewalk back in a little bit tighter or having some spots where people can sit, having that little pocket park, making the most out of that pocket park. We'll see more from you on that too, I'm sure. I'm not so concerned about pedestrians crossing the drive aisle. It happens all the time. It happens up at Hilltop. It happens up by the funeral home. It's just the way it is. If I'm at Target, I'm crossing a drive aisle, a pretty significant drive aisle. So I think people will learn how to be careful there, and drivers will as well, watching for pedestrians. It doesn't seem like there's any pedestrian visibility problem there. I think regardless of the direction the vehicle's moving, they're going to see people on the sidewalk there. And that's about all I've got for now too. I get it. I prefer taller, skinnier, but as you said, Mr. Mernan, skinny it up as much as you can. keeping in mind what you need to produce these days for an office building to make it habitable and to make people want to be there. And I'm sure there will be companies that want to be there where you're occupying a significant portion of it as your corporate headquarters. So we look forward to the next phase. Anybody else that prompt anything from anybody else?
Thank you.
Okay. So follow on. Member Jackson?
Yeah, the one thing that I see where the bike room is, just to make sure that bike access, you're not too conflicted with the cars.
That's already moved.
Okay.
No, we've got a better spot.
Okay, good.
We're trying to celebrate that a little more.
Okay,
have
good.
a little better spot. So yes,
All right.
that'll be relocated.
All right, terrific, thank you.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments.
All right, now we're going to move on. Member Agnew has talked about this, I think, briefly before, and said she was going to come back with something and asked staff to look at some ordinances on this issue of inhumanely bred animals from some other jurisdictions. And I'm going to turn now to Member Agnew to introduce the topic.
Yes, thank you very much. So this actually was initiated a few months ago when I had a resident reach out to me, really just sharing the perspective of growing concerns of the sale of dogs and cats from commercial breeding facilities where animals are often kept in inhumane conditions with inadequate vet care, socialization, and kind of exercise, all of those necessary components for the healthiness of animals. So I looked into it a little bit more, did some research, tried to understand the topic, and in some ways, like, it can be hard to find some data, but the ASPCA said that approximately 9,200 animals are euthanized annually. And so this is me wanting to, within the city of Edina, kind of take action to prevent inhumanely bred animals from being sold within the city of Edina. I will say this isn't something that's necessarily like a huge concern of mine. This isn't we have a problem and we're trying to address that problem within the city explicitly. But the more that I studied, there was a case just a couple of months ago, I think it was late last year, in Beltrami County, so northern Minnesota. And there was a lot of news articles about it, and it's really sad and it's really terrible. And so the idea was, if there's something that we could do within the city that would help prevent this from happening, wanted to look at that. So that's when I reached out to Scott Neal, and we came up with the ordinance as it is drafted. So I'm happy to talk any more about it, answer any questions, but also happy to kind of hand it over to Manager Neal for kind of advice on next steps.
Thank you, Councilmember Agnew and members of council. This particular ordinance is one that was drafted by our city attorney. He looked at a couple other communities that had similar ordinances, but kind of adapted them to fit what you see tonight. If you do wish to take an action on this tonight, of course you can. It would be first reading, and if you do, and we would schedule a second reading for your February 4th council meeting.
Well, I can't get it up on my screen. My whole screen was black, and now I can't. I got that back, but now I can't even get the ordinance on my screen. So, and remember Jackson's having a problem too.
I am, but I do.
Her screen's black.
Yeah.
So for some reason, the Wi-Fi, after a certain number of minutes, dies. Well, it doesn't die. It kind of resets, so you have to reconnect.
Try scrolling.
It says it's connected. Anyways, I have a question about the content, and that it's more about the operation. Would the city have to hire someone to enforce this, or what kind of cost would this generate?
Councilmember Jackson, members of council, we would not hire additional staff for this ordinance. We would use existing staff that are here. It's hard for me to estimate how many many hours would be devoted to this, because we don't really think there's much of a problem at the moment. But we do have an animal control officer, we do have public health functions. So between the two of those, that's how we would enforce this in the future.
Okay, and currently, we don't really have any pet stores, I think, in Edina. There's none at the mall, so.
Do we allow pet stores?
Yeah.
Yes, they'd be allowed in the commercial zoning districts.
So this is more preventative almost than anything else.
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah, and really the intention here is, you know, even to say if there were to be a pet store, that they have to follow the like very specific regulations to ensure that they're kind of humanely operating.
Sort of like the, I can't think of the term, but in manufacturing, the chain of custody, that every step, a piece of food that you eat is documented so that you know that it hasn't been tampered with along the way.
So it's different because obviously these are pets and not food,
Right.
but it is a USDA license.
Okay.
So that is kind of the official governing body.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, I'm finished, thank you.
Okay. What's the definition of commercial kennel and breeding facility? I mean, do we allow those?
We do, I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's if you hold more than 3 dogs. We do have some commercial kennels. We're just not aware of them selling.
We have some commercial kennels now.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that, so a veterinarian that boards dogs would be a commercial kennel, or maybe there's a commercial kennel down on 70th and Cahill. I've seen some dogs
I
behind the
believe there is
facility
one down there, yes. And to clarify, pet stores are allowed in the PCD 2 and 3 districts, not the PCD 1 district.
And do we allow breeding facilities too?
I don't know how we would distinguish that from a kennel.
Kendall? Can you distinguish between
Well, Mayor, I
a
did use
commercial
the,
kennel and a breeding facility?
I did use the definition of commercial kennel from the ordinance, and it is defined as a place with more than 3 dogs. Let me see if I can find where I found the definition for breeding facility. That may have come from one of the other ordinances that I had looked at. I don't think that's defined in existing city ordinance. I do know that I did an internet search, and I think there is a business in Edina that sells dogs that they've bred. I don't know that they breed them on site. They may breed them somewhere else and then sell them through that website.
So if we think of a commercial, I'm looking at D, subsection 8118D. Commercial kennel shall display a notice in a conspicuous place on or within 3 feet of each animal's kennel, cage, and or enclosure that identifies the name of the source from which the animal was obtained and the source's contact information. So it makes me think if a commercial kennel includes people that maintain a facility that takes care of pets when somebody's out of town, for example, for a week. Does that mean they've got to display a sign every time they rent a space to a family that displays where the dog came from? It came from the Jones family over on the particular street?
Yeah, I think it probably would require that. I mean, and for boarding facilities, I mean, they could just put the name of the dog and the family that's boarding the dog there.
But why would they need to do that, though? If you're at a boarding kennel, you're not selling pets. And so this is saying it's the sale of inhumanely bred animals. It's not boarding.
Yeah, this is designed to prevent sale of animals.
So if you have a boarding kennel, you would not need to do that. I don't know if there's any value in doing it. So I had the questions around,
Yeah, go ahead. Ask
Member
them, please.
Jackson had asked the operational side of it, and so you answered that. The other question I had, when I read through this, I thought, the first question was, what are we really trying to accomplish with this? I definitely don't have any issue with the premise of the concern of inhumanely bred animals. But then I wondered, if we don't have any businesses today that do this in Edina, this felt a little bit more like we should maybe be doing something from an awareness standpoint as well, because I think that might actually yield more value for our community at this point in time. If there was some awareness to say, like for us, we purchased our dog from a kennel near St. Cloud. And so you get the whole, here's who the parents are, here's where they came from, this is how, they were raised and bred. And so you kind of get the whole, I don't know what you call it. I want to say blockchain.
Genetic blockchain, yeah.
Yeah, so you get all of that. But it was kind of word of mouth when we said we were looking for a pet, and someone said, well, you be careful what kennel you get them from, because they could be bred inhumanely or too many times or whatever. And so I do think from an awareness standpoint, there could be something as a city that will be more valuable for us to talk through, to make people aware of, in addition to having this as an ordinance.
Member Pierce, members of council, if you adopt this and put it into play, there's a communications plan that would go with it to talk to the community about what it is, why we're doing it, how does it work. Yeah.
I like to, read it several times here now and read it in preparation too, but for me, as an old tactile guy, having a piece of paper in front of me is nice. Thank you. Thank you, Clerk Allison, when my computer wasn't functioning. I like the language after the first two sentences in the first paragraph, subparagraph A, where I would think you could almost start out saying, the city council seeks to discourage the inhumane breeding of animals by limiting their profitability through sale to commercial kennels, without limiting commercial kennels from engaging in collaborative effort. That part, I wasn't sure about the value of the first two sentences. But I do like, what we're getting to. Member Pierce says, what's the purpose? Well, B has one of the purposes, and C and D as well. And E, of course, provides a penalty for operating in violation of the ordinance. But if Member Agnew likes the way it's worded in its entirety, I'm comfortable with that, I guess. At least for a first reading basis, we got to come back and approve second reading, and it gives us a chance to maybe think about it a little bit more and the structure of it. Member Risser?
I concur. The one question I have is if the penalties referenced make sense for all of the violations, because it says upon first, violation, they shall be guilty of a petty misdemeanor. And I don't know if that would adequately address somebody, buying from, maybe it would, but to your point, this is just the first meeting or reading of this, and we can think about that.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Are there more in section 8.3 other than petty misdemeanor?
Upon the second conviction, guilty of a misdemeanor. And so it ramps up, but if that first act is, should merit a response greater than a petty misdemeanor, we might want to think about that.
Yeah, you might want to beef that up a little bit and go to a higher level.
Mayor, there's also a sentence in there about the first and each subsequent violation of certain sections shall be a misdemeanor. So if you wanted to make the first violation of this section a misdemeanor, you could do that as well.
Okay. Well, we've had a pretty good little discussion on this issue. I'm comfortable if we read this or pass it on a first reading basis and then maybe refine it a little bit for second reading. Is that okay, Member Agnew?
Absolutely.
Do you want to move the matter?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Member Agnew moves, Member Pierce seconds the adoption of proposed ordinance 2025-01, an ordinance amending Chapter 8, Article 3 of the Edina City Code concerning the sale of inhumanely bred animals on a first reading basis. As I said, a motion and a second to that effect. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried? Okay, let's, I can probably hang on to this, can't I? I can fiddle around with this one. All right, very good. That's our workload tonight for the most part. We've got some things to report out on. Manager Neal, your comments?
Thank you, Your Honor. I've got a number of things to report on tonight. First is I want to give you, I told you earlier in January that this evening I'd give you a status report on our progress to identify contractions that we would make in our 2025 budget. And I'm ready to do that tonight. We have went through a process at the staff level to identify enough savings that we could meet the requirement of the 8.44 levy increase that went from 2024 to 2025. That required us to reduce $545,000 in general fund spending, and we have identified a number of reductions that we can make. We're putting those reductions into the form of a council action, into the form specifically as an amendment, a formal council amendment to the 2025 city budget, and we'll be presenting those to you at your February 4th meeting. The savings come through kind of vacancy placement savings that we know we're going to have in 2025. We also reclassified some equipment purchases into different capital accounts rather than paying cash for them. We've reduced some professional services, and we've really taken what I would say is a broad-based approach to how we do this, with the kind of pursuing our values as an organization and not just a straight kind of across-the-board reduction for everybody. So we'll talk more about those, and I'll have that on the agenda for the February 4th council meeting. At the same time, we've also been preparing for the 2026-2027 budget process. We're going to start preparing you for that process as well. And you know that staff are all working on kind of educational presentations about service level and how to parse service levels within a particular service. We plan to present some of that information to you at our work session on February 4th, and then a special work session on February 6th. So we'll be spending a lot of time getting that ready for you. We've had a discussion here previously on a possible pilot project for community comment. I know you've received some comment not in favor of this, but we could, I could, if you wish, prepare you a pilot project with some policies and procedures and protocol around community comment if you wish to change it. Then at least you've got something tangible that you can like or dislike. But I would like to put that in front of you also at your February 4th meeting, unless council is not interested in doing that. Final thing that I have for you tonight is just to celebrate a couple of anniversaries. Ari Lenz, our new assistant city manager, is not here tonight, but she will complete 1 year of service tomorrow. On the other end of that continuum is Jennifer Benarat, who completed 25 years of service on January 3rd. So congratulations, Jen. Speech? No speech. Okay, no speech for her.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you.
Oh, good information. Thank you. Member Risser.
Since it was just brought up and looking for feedback about whether we talk about changing community comment at our next council meeting, I had the thought that maybe what we want to do is pitch that question in our quality of life survey that goes out every 2 years and find out what the community thinks about doing that before we take action. So just a suggestion there. But what I was going to talk about before you mentioned that was the plastic-free challenge that's coming up in February, and we are participating in that. There is a kickoff meeting or an educational meeting February 1st at the Edina Library, and it's really kind of relevant and very sort of exciting to learn. We can learn from Gabriella Rousseau, the Green Corps member here, and I'm going to try to do my best. I'm really kind of interested in learning about the plastics that I'm probably not even aware of, but that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So on Sunday at evening, my doorbell rang. Hello, this is the city of Edina, and we have a water main break in the middle of your street. And so you're not going to have water for 6 hours. So I wanted to, it really raise the awareness of the services that the city gives and how grateful I am that people were out in the cold fixing a water main break. It took a long time. I wasn't able to wash my hands all night, so I kept, have a snack, and then you're like, sticky fingers, and so you expect to turn on the faucet and the water to come out. And so my heightened awareness of how grateful I am that we have water that's potable and turns on from a tap. When you don't have it, you really miss it. And I wanted to have a shout out to the City of Edina employees who were out on Sunday in the cold fixing that. That was really a big deal. And then it made me think, we were upstairs talking about the art center and some of the park facilities. And recently, our very own Tracy Peterson, who is the Assistant Director of Recreation and Facilities, got an award from her professional association, the Minnesota Recreation and Park Association. She got the Clinton E. French Award, which is the highest award possible for park and recreation facility directors. And so I'm super proud of her for getting that. And it just shows the high quality of employees that we have in the city. So kudos all around to everybody who's doing a good job, and thanks for fixing the water main.
Thank you. Member Pierce.
Just a comment. The community comment piece that you talked about, you mentioned just now, I didn't think that we were doing that. And so I may have just misremembered the conversation that we had. And so I think what I would say is, if we are going to look at a proposal, I would be in favor of making changes that increase the amount of community comment, right? So that we got more feedback, we got more community engagement. I don't know that I would be in favor of doing something that will be less, less engaging. Maybe I'd put it that way. And so other than that, I don't have any additional, oh no, I did one other thing. I wanted to commend city staff and so the leadership going through the budget conversation, right? That's been very taxing, I think, for all of us for the past few months. And so I do appreciate that for 2025, you and staff have gone through and you'll be recommending a proposal there. And I think the process that you've talked about utilizing for 2026 is a good process. The question I have is, did you want to say anything about what you're thinking in terms of community engagement for the 2026 piece?
I'm not ready to do that tonight, actually. We've got some more discussion in-house about how we want to approach the public around it. We did talk a little bit about simulating the same kind of community task force that the school district is looking at. So we are studying that right now to see how that would fit within our own time frame and organization. So that's a possibility. It's one place to start. It would have some advantages that our one population could see that both of its primary city and school are working along the same lines and using some similar strategies. So that might be the best way to go.
Okay. And that was it. I just wanted you to share that you were thinking about ways that might be beneficial for us to get community involvement in that. And with that, that's all I had.
Thank you. Member Agnew.
Nothing for me this week. Just trying to stay warm.
Yeah, thanks. Couple of things for me to cover, and one of them relates to this issue of what we've been talking about up here, this community comment. And as you know, I was at the U.S. Conference of Mayors winter meeting over the weekend, and I had a chance to see some of our colleagues that are nearby, Bloomington, Eden Prairie, Burnsville, and asked them about the type of process they use for community comment. And we talked about Eden Prairie. They do theirs at 6:30 at night off camera, spend a half an hour or 20 minutes and answer people's questions, but record it. Bloomington used to do it, I think, like we do it. Now they said they went to a process where they do it out of chambers in a separate room, like the community room, on audio only, not recorded. And they're getting a different kind of participation from people. They're getting more people coming because they feel comfortable not being on TV. There may be some people that feel totally comfortable, but they're getting more people now that are coming with neighborhood issues that want to visit with the council in an informal way and have an actual conversation back and forth, as opposed to just intaking information and saying, we'll get back to you with an answer. And then Burnsville uses a variation of what we do, but the mayor meets with the people beforehand and they get a list of people who want to engage in community comment and what they want to talk about and what questions do they have for staff, so they can direct them to the appropriate staff person and kind of do it in the moment. So those are just a few ways that other cities are engaged in community comment, and we'll talk more about it on the 5th of February, I guess. So we had something of quite a significant nature occur in our community last night. Willard Eichela passed away. A longtime Edina coach, 8 state championships, I think. And Scott got a long text message from Casey Hankinson, and I thought it would be appropriate to read that, and we asked Jennifer to find a few photos of Coach Ike. We've got that wonderful bronze statue of him out in front of the Braemar Ice Arena. And yeah, look at that. I had him up on the screen last night. And so here's a note to Scott Neal from from Casey Hankinson, and he sent to Scott what he had been sending to people that he knew would want to know that Coach Eichela had passed away. It's with a very heavy heart that we let you know that our legendary leader, Coach Eichela, passed away last night at 10:35 p.m. at the age of 92. It's impossible to think about Edina hockey without thinking about Coach Ike. We were all so blessed to have his presence each year at the Eichela Cup event last year. That's a golfing event that hockey veterans have for raising funds for the hockey program. The stories Coach would tell are legendary, and always wondered how he could retain that knowledge. One year I asked him, "Coach, how do you remember all those details?" His answer was, "I do a little preparing the week before." That says a lot about Coach Ike. Details mattered, and he cared enough to prepare so he could be at his best. We will cherish all the memories we had with Coach Ike, certainly a legend on the ice, but also off, a true ranger, and one that shared so many valuable lessons with those around him. I thought I'd share the words from the plaque near the Coach Ike statue at Braemar. Willard Coach Ike Eichela. After Coach Ike's playing career ended, he became the heart and soul of Edina hockey as he forged an illustrious 33-year high school coaching career. Players would flood to outdoor rinks and skate on frozen ponds in order to practice until the construction of Braemar Arena in 1965. Ike helped create a tradition of Edina hockey and worked with the Edina Hockey Association to build one of the greatest hockey programs in the United States. It was every player's dream to compete for one of his teams and play for the Hornets. Famous for his iconic houndstooth hat, Ike was modest when speaking of his coaching record. He said, "I never coached a goal or prevented one either. All the credit for our success belongs to the kids." Coach Ike emphasized the fundamentals of hockey and was a disciplinarian with a firm and fair manner. The gentlemanly mentor often said, "You have to be humble in victory and gracious in defeat." It was Eichela's way. Every season, many former Edina hockey players have returned to the community and volunteered to help support, sustain, and pass on the Edina hockey tradition. Eveleth High School, three-time state champion. Minnesota State High School record holder in most career games in a tournament, 12, most wins, 10, shutouts, 5. Played for the Michigan Wolverines, 2 ties, two-time NCAA national champion, all-tournament team twice, first team All-American West, Team USA Olympic silver medalist, 1956 in Cortina, Italy. U.S. national team, 57-58, Edina High School, record of 616 wins, 149 losses, and 38 ties. 19 state tournament appearances. Minnesota State High School League records, most state championships, 8, most state finals, 10, most wins, 38. Hall of Fame, United States Hockey Association, University of Michigan Hall of Fame, Minnesota High School Coaches Hall of Fame, National High School Sports Hall of Fame, Minnesota State Coaches Association Hall of Fame, and Edina High School Athletic Hall of Fame. When more details become available regarding Coach Ike's service, Casey said he'd pass them on, and we will as well, I'm sure. So Coach Ike and family, we wish you the best in the next part of your post-earthly living, and for his family, you have all of our best. We're so grateful that you were a part of our community. Thank you. And then I wanted to report out a little bit on that meeting I described that I went to a U.S. Conference of Mayors. On Friday, we had a really great morning plenary session. The first person we had was, and these folks this was their last public appearance for many of them, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy had some really interesting observations around mental health. And he had just a great quote about the dangers of social media and what it's doing to our kids. He said they live in a world now where they need to matter in a world of constant comparison. And I thought that was really quite apropos to what we're seeing our kids facing as they, it's tough enough in life when you're a kid to wonder how you compare to other people or thinking you don't compare well. What are you good for? How do you matter? But now in the world kids live in, this need to matter in a world of constant comparison is really, really difficult. He talked about the root causes of what he has observed over time as serving as Surgeon General as the what he called the triad, the wrong triad that's being followed, and that's fame, wealth, and power. And they become the root cause of unhappiness, because he said what people should be seeking is the triad of fulfillment, which is the building of relationships, the commitment to service, and the commitment to purpose. And those should all be the cores of every pillar, core pillars of every community, which I think we would concur with that. So the question for him at the end of the day was, what kind of a nation do we want to be? And sent us off with a message that I think we follow quite well here, and that is to make community your goal. Put people first. And then we had Pete Buttigieg, who, the outgoing U.S. DOT secretary, talked about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. So, that was a $1.2 trillion act. We've got 72,000 projects funded in hundreds of cities and counties across the country, 207,000 road projects, 12,300 bridge projects, 1,500 airports are undergoing some form of renovation. And he said the transportation system represents the trajectory of us as a country. He had some other interesting things to comment on as well. But emphasized that local government acting in the public interest is needed now more than ever. And local government, local leaders in government, mayors and city councils can help sort fact from fiction, reality from speculation and accusation. And that we are far better off together offline, and that one person can get more done from a city council standpoint, meeting at the grocery store, than some person sitting in their basement on a keyboard. So, and emphasized again this importance of partnership with local leaders, and that we're living in a world created by local leaders, and the salvation must come from local leaders as well. So those are some of the key. And then at the noon plenary, we had President Biden, which was his last public appearance, and that was wonderful to have him in there as well. I went to several sessions, several different days on housing-related issues, because we're working on that as a part of the Association of MLC. So that was important to get that information. On Saturday, we had another good opening session. The mayor of Lviv, Ukraine, was there, which is a city of about 1 million people, and talked about the resilience of Ukrainians. Target, we had Target's a corporate sponsor for U.S. Conference of Mayors, so it was nice to visit with the Target folks that were there for the morning plenary. And then we heard more on housing at that particular plenary as well. And then went on to other meetings during the day, including the use of AI to build public trust and connection. That was an interesting session. How are we going to keep climate work going? Now we're out of the Paris Climate Accords. There's a strategy session for mayors around how to keep our climate work going. There was a session I didn't get to, but I'm sure it was interesting, about how to talk about the future, which all of us are thinking about. And then the afternoon plenary session had some awards on environmental health and childhood obesity. And there's some things that we should be doing there as well. We had a bunch of West Point cadets there with Dr. Frank Lentz, who's a pollster. And I'll share those slides that he created that deal with the trust in local government. And then we had the session about how some of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act grants are transforming communities. We had a session at the end of the day on Saturday that I attended on combating anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and other forms of hate and extremism. And here tonight we heard from the gentleman from the Hindu temple on that very topic. And then various groups had meetings on Saturday night. You know that you work till 5:30 or so, and then at 6:30 they say the buses are leaving. And Saturday night we ended up at the residence of the Spanish ambassador to the United States. And then on Friday I also had that session that I ran as the chair of the Transportation Commission, or the Standing Committee on Transportation. And we had Polly Trottenberg there, the undersecretary, the deputy secretary for U.S. DOT. who gave her kind of observations over the 4 years of the IIJA, or the bipartisan infrastructure law, as they call it. We have then reports out from our various vice chairs on intermodal, on Amtrak. We had the CEO of Amtrak there, Stephen Gardner, who talked about the fact that Amtrak's business, since Congress has invested in them, in the Northeast Corridor, is up 25%. Also report outs on transit, and then some strategies about what's ahead. In fact, that's what we talked about on Sunday. They cut the meeting short because of the weather on Sunday. We were done by noon, actually late morning. And that they had all the standing chairs as part of a plenary session and a panel to talk about what were some of the things that we were expecting to see in the next session. And then we got a chance to talk a little bit about the reauthorization of the Surface Transportation Act, which takes place by September 30th of 2026. And some of the things that we're going to work on there in terms of localism, more pressure on local streets because of the changed behavior of people, how they work, how they shop. And then also we talked a little bit about what we expect will be some pressure on transit systems. And when you think about the need for transit and getting past this period where we had concerns about public safety and public health on public transportation systems, including mostly transit, you think about 90+% of our GDP being produced in 3% of our land mass. You better have an effective transit system to be able to make sure that our economy flourishes. So that's kind of a summary report of the things that I was involved in at the session, and we got a leadership meeting the end of February, and that's kind of what happened, as I say, in a summary form at the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting in D.C. And of course, there were a lot of activities around the inauguration going on. In the hotel we were at, that was where all the Florida Republicans were gathering, and they had a big event on Saturday night. It was kind of interesting to see all the people all dressed up in different ways, and some had caps on and some didn't, and some had tuxedos and some didn't. And anyway, it was an interesting time to be in Washington. That's it for me.
So you spoke a lot about housing. I'd be interested in hearing more in depth, whether it's by email or maybe an HRA meeting, if you had just a brief outline, whether it's we're doing the same thing that other people are doing or ideas that you got, because I think we're always looking for,
I think
normalizing what we're doing.
Right, I think that's a great point, and I think one of the things I'm waiting for now is them to produce all of the PowerPoints that were there, because Harvard was there with presenting on their housing studies that they've done around the country. The Pew Trust was there talking about some of the things that are going on. It made me think a little bit about what we did over at the Residence Inn on that conversion, on that hotel property. They said what's happening now with a lot of the office buildings around the country is that they're being converted into housing, but because of the way the plumbing runs, of course, they can't have so it's dormitory style. End up, to accommodate, maybe it's folks that are coming out of homelessness that need a shelter all the way to 30% of their median income, and they're creating dormitory style housing out of some of these apartment buildings where they can have a bathroom every floor, and they can expand off of that existing plumbing in those bathrooms to create additional stalls and then also bathing capacity. So that was something that we haven't seen anything of around here yet, but we may be seeing that in some parts of the community too. Not our community necessarily, but others that are around the metro. But as soon as I get all that information pulled together, I'll send it out.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Member Jackson moves and Member Agnew seconds. We adjourn the meeting of the Edina City Council this 21st day of January 2025. It is 10:34 p.m. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. City Council of Edina stands adjourned this 21st day of January 2025.